Welcome to the Channel Science documentary for sleep. I'm glad you're here, whether you're fully awake, very tired, or already drifting a little. You don't need to do anything at all. You don't need to listen closely. You might notice your breath easing, or your body settling into the surface beneath you, or nothing in particular, and all of that is perfectly fine. Tonight, we're exploring something very small and very real, the quiet, ordinary science of atoms, told slowly, with plenty of room to rest. Atoms are everywhere, and they're also easy to let fade into the background. They make up stars and oceans, skin and air, dust and distant planets. They form electrons moving in soft probability clouds, nuclei held together by forces that have been at work for billions of years. Some atoms bond, some drift alone, some gather into crystals, gases, living cells, or rings of ice around faraway worlds. These facts come from careful observation and long curiosity, but you don't need to hold on to any of them. You might feel interested for a moment, then relaxed, then distracted. Your attention may wander, loop back, or dissolve completely. Nothing is being asked of you here. If you'd like to stay with the sound for a while, you're welcome to. And if parts of this slip past unnoticed, that's not a problem at all. Atoms are often described as the smallest pieces of matter that still behave like something. Not the smallest things that exist, but the smallest things that still carry an identity. An atom of hydrogen behaves like hydrogen wherever it drifts, whether it's floating between galaxies or quietly paired with oxygen in a glass of water. Astronomers and chemists have found the same patterns repeating again and again, across distances that don't easily fit into imagination. There's something steady about that sameness. No matter where an atom goes, it doesn't need to learn how to be itself again. Inside each atom, there is a center called the nucleus, dense and compact, holding most of the atom's mass. Around it, electrons don't move like tiny planets, even though that image lingers because it's gentle and familiar. Instead, electrons exist as regions of probability, places where they are likely to be, soft and blurry rather than sharply defined. It means that even at the smallest scales, nature allows room for uncertainty. Nothing is perfectly pinned down. Everything has a little looseness built in. You don't need to picture this clearly. You don't need to remember the words. It's enough to know that matter, at its foundation, is not rigid or harsh. It's spacious. And if this thought fades or drifts away, that's fine too. Atoms will keep being atoms without your attention. Atoms are mostly empty space. This is one of those facts that often returns, because it's simple and strange at the same time. If the nucleus were the size of a grain of sand, the electrons would be far away, with nothing solid in between. Most of what feels firm tables, walls, the ground beneath you is shaped by forces rather than solidity. Electromagnetic interactions hold atoms apart, keeping structures stable without requiring them to be packed tightly together. This means that the world you're resting in right now is quiet space, arranged in reliable patterns. The atoms in your body are not pressing against each other like crowded objects. They're balanced, held in place by relationships rather than contact. Physicists talk about forces and fields, but you can let those words soften into the background. What matters is the gentleness of the arrangement. Even when atoms vibrate, even when they shift with heat or motion, they remain within narrow ranges that keep structures intact. The floor doesn't suddenly forget how to be solid. Your body doesn't scatter into randomness. There's a quiet consistency at work, moment after moment, without effort or supervision. You don't need to stay awake for this to continue. It's already taken care of. Atoms form bonds. Some bonds are strong and lasting, like those in diamond, where carbon atoms lock into repeating patterns that can endure for immense spans of time. Other bonds are loose and temporary, breaking and reforming with ease, like the molecules in warm air or flowing water. Chemists describe these bonds with numbers and diagrams, but at heart they are simple acts of staying close. An atom doesn't decide to bond, it responds to its surroundings. Electrons arrange themselves in ways that lower energy, settling into states that are quieter, more stable. This tendency toward lower energy isn't a struggle, it's more like a preference, gently followed over and over again. Matter drifts toward calm configurations whenever it can. In living bodies, atoms exchange partners constantly. The atoms that make up you right now are not the same ones you had years ago. They arrive, stay for a while, and move on. Still, the overall pattern remains familiar. Continuity doesn't require permanence, it only requires balance. If this sounds abstract, you don't need to resolve it. It can remain a soft idea, half-formed. Atoms come together, separate, and come together again. Without anxiety, there's no memory required, there's no effort involved. Atoms also carry time inside them. Some are stable for as long as the universe has existed so far. Others slowly change, releasing particles or energy as they transform into different elements. This process is called radioactive decay, but it's quieter than the name suggests. It's not an explosion most of the time. It's a gradual letting go. Physicists measure half-lives that stretch from fractions of a second to billions of years. An atom of uranium doesn't hurry. It doesn't know when it will change. It simply exists, moment by moment, until it doesn't exist in quite the same way anymore. Even then, nothing is lost. The pieces continue on. This means that time, at the atomic level, is patient. Change is built in, but it's not urgent. Some transformations take longer than planets take to form and fade. Others happen invisibly fast. Both are normal. Neither demands attention. You might notice your thoughts loosening here, or slipping sideways. That's all right. Atoms don't require witnesses to keep unfolding their quiet timelines. They've been doing this long before there were minds to notice. They'll continue whether this part is heard or missed entirely. At the deepest level we can currently describe, atoms arise from fields, continuous presences that fill space everywhere. Particles appear as gentle excitations in these fields, like ripples that never quite detach from the surface beneath them. This means that separation is not as complete as it sometimes feels. Everything is embedded in something larger. An atom drifting alone in space is still connected to the fields that allow it to exist at all. There is no true isolation, even in the coldest, emptiest regions between stars. Vacuum is not nothing. It has structure, fluctuation, and quiet activity. This idea can rest lightly, without needing to be understood. If you're awake, you might sense a small comfort in that. If you're asleep, the thought can pass by unnoticed. Both are fine. Atoms don't mind being ignored. They don't ask to be understood. They simply persist, moment after moment, forming the background of everything familiar, your body, your surroundings. The air moving softly nearby, all of it is made of these same calm components. Nothing here is in a hurry. Nothing is waiting for a response. The atoms will keep their slow, steady company, whether you stay with them or drift gently away. Atoms don't experience temperature the way people do, but they respond to it quietly and faithfully. When energy enters a system, atoms begin to move a little more, vibrating in place or sliding past one another with slightly wider motions. When energy leaves, those motions soften. Nothing dramatic happens at the level of a single atom. There is no sense of heat or cold, only patterns shifting by small degrees. In a warm room, the atoms in the air drift a bit faster, colliding gently, changing direction, redistributing energy without intention. In a colder space, they slow, but they don't stop. Absolute stillness is never quite reached. even near absolute zero, there remains a faint restlessness called 0-point energy, a reminder that motion is woven into existence itself. You don't need to imagine this clearly. It's enough to know that stillness and movement are not opposites here. They overlap. Atoms can be calm without being frozen, active without being chaotic. If your own state feels somewhere in between, neither fully alert nor fully asleep, that fits easily into this picture. Atoms also interact with light. When photons pass through matter, some are absorbed, some reflected, some allowed to continue on. This is how colours appear, how transparency works, how shadows form and dissolve. An atom doesn't see light. It simply responds to certain energies and not others. When an atom absorbs light, one of its electrons moves into a slightly higher energy state. Later, it returns to where it was before, releasing that energy again as light. This happens constantly, everywhere, without announcement. Light is borrowed and returned, over and over, in quiet exchanges. The light in this room, wherever you are, is shaped by countless atomic decisions made without awareness or memory. Surfaces look solid or soft, bright or dim, because atoms are interacting in their habitual ways. Nothing needs to be managed. The glow simply happens. If your eyes are closed, this can fade into abstraction. If they're open, it may remain unnoticed. Atoms don't depend on observation. They don't perform. They just continue. Atoms are identical in ways that feel almost reassuring. Every electron carries the same charge, the same mass, the same behavior. A proton here is indistinguishable from a proton billions of light years away. Physicists have tested this again and again, and the answer remains steady. This sameness means the universe is quietly fair at the smallest scales. There are no special cases. No particle gets a different rule. The laws apply evenly, without preference. That reliability allows complexity to emerge without supervision. From identical atoms come unique arrangements, snowflakes, cells, clouds, minds. Difference arises not from special materials, but from patterns layered gently over time. The atoms themselves remain uncomplicated. They don't carry identity beyond their basic properties. You don't need to hold on to this idea. It can pass through like a simple reassurance. Complex things don't require complex building blocks. Sometimes sameness is what allows variety to rest into place. Atoms also participate in sound, though not in the way it's often imagined. Sound waves are not objects moving through air, but patterns of compression and release. Atoms shift closer together, then slightly apart, passing motion along like a quiet message. Each atom moves only a little, oscillating around an average position. No atom travels from the source of a sound to your ear. Instead, energy moves, carried by many small adjustments. It's a cooperative process, distributed and gentle. The sounds around you right now, distant traffic, a fan, breath, silence itself, are shaped by atoms responding together. Nothing is pushed far from where it belongs. Everything participates briefly, then settles back. If this description feels distant, that's all right. Sound doesn't need to be understood to be present. Atoms will continue their small movements whether or not this registers consciously. They don't mind repetition. They don't mind quiet. Atoms are also involved in memory, though not in a symbolic way. In the brain, atoms arrange into molecules that form structures capable of change. Connections strengthen or weaken. Patterns adjust. No single atom remembers anything, but together they allow memory to appear. This means forgetting is not a failure at the atomic level. Atoms are constantly rearranging, trading places, responding to chemistry and time. Stability is always temporary. Change is normal, expected, and built in. If details from earlier drift away, that mirrors what matter itself does. Nothing stays fixed, nothing needs to. Continuity comes from ongoing process, not perfect preservation. Atoms don't judge what is kept and what is lost. They simply continue forming the conditions for new patterns to arise. You can let thoughts loosen here, knowing that forgetting is part of how systems remain flexible. At the edges of what we know, atoms behave in ways that feel almost shy. Quantum effects allow particles to exist in superpositions, occupying multiple possibilities until interaction occurs. This isn't something they choose, it's how the underlying structure of reality expresses itself. An atom can be described as having properties that are not fully settled until measured. But measurement doesn't need to be imagined as an act. It's simply interaction. Everything interacts eventually. This means that uncertainty is not a flaw or a gap in understanding. It's a feature of how things are. Atoms are not required to be precise beyond what interaction demands. They are allowed to be vague. If your own awareness feels vague right now, unfocused or floating, it fits gently alongside this. Clarity is not always necessary. Sometimes softness is more accurate. Atoms, in their quiet way, make room for that softness everywhere. Atoms have been part of the universe since its earliest moments. Hydrogen formed first, simple and abundant, followed by helium. Heavier atoms arrived later, forged inside stars, released when those stars changed or ended. Every atom heavier than helium carries a history of extreme heat and pressure. The iron in your blood, the calcium in bone, the carbon in every cell, all were shaped in stellar interiors long before there were planets or life. They travelled through space, cooled, gathered, and eventually became part of much smaller systems. Nothing about them remembers this journey. They don't carry nostalgia or meaning. Still, the continuity is real. Atoms don't reset when they change context. They simply keep being what they are, wherever they happen to be. There's something steady in that persistence across scale and time. If this sense of deep time feels distant, it can fade. If it feels comforting, it can linger. Atoms don't require you to meet them emotionally. They're patient either way. They remain quietly as the background of everything familiar. Atoms do not hurry, even when they participate in reactions that seem fast at a human scale. Their changes unfold according to probabilities rather than schedules. A chemical reaction doesn't happen because an atom decides its time. It happens because conditions align, energies match, and pathways open quietly. When they don't, nothing happens at all. This means that waiting is built into matter itself. Atoms can sit next to one another for ages without changing, and then, without warning, rearrange in a brief moment. Neither state is more correct than the other. Both are simply parts of how matter behaves when left to itself. You might notice that your own waiting tonight has no particular goal. There's nowhere to arrive. If sleep comes, it comes. If it doesn't, that's also acceptable. Atoms don't rush outcomes. They allow conditions to be what they are. Atoms respond to pressure in similarly quiet ways. When compressed, they don't resist out of stubbornness. Their electron clouds begin to overlap slightly, and repulsive forces increase. This balance creates solidity without effort or intention. Deep inside planets, atoms are pressed into unfamiliar arrangements. Under immense pressure, materials behave differently. Carbon becomes diamond. Hydrogen begins to act like a metal. These changes are not dramatic events. They're calm adjustments to new surroundings. Even under the weight of entire worlds, atoms don't protest. They adapt. They find new patterns that fit the circumstances. If your own surroundings feel heavy or light tonight, that contrast can simply exist. Atoms don't judge pressure. They respond, and then they settle. Atoms also drift. In gases, they move freely, traveling long distances between collisions. In liquids, they stay close but slide past one another, trading neighbors constantly. In solids, They remain anchored to positions, vibrating gently without wandering far. None of these states is permanent. A change in energy, and atoms rearrange their relationships. Ice melts, water evaporates, steam condenses back into liquid. These transitions don't damage the atoms involved. They simply offer different ways of being together. If your own state feels fluid tonight, thoughts loosening, attention shifting that fits comfortably here, atoms don't insist on one form. They move between arrangements as conditions allow. Nothing is lost in the transition. Atoms are also involved in smell, though in a subtle way. Molecules drift through the air, carrying particular shapes and energies. When they reach receptors in the nose, they fit briefly, triggering signals. The atoms themselves remain unchanged. Smell is not stored in the atoms. It emerges from interaction. A rose doesn't contain roseness as a substance. It releases molecules that momentarily interact with another system. The experience appears, then fades. This impermanence is ordinary. Atoms don't cling to impressions. They pass through systems, participate briefly, and move on. If memories or sensations rise and fall as you rest, that's not instability. It's alignment with how matter behaves. Atoms also play a role in electricity. When electrons move through materials, currents form. This motion is guided by fields, pathways, and resistance. No electron knows where it's going. It responds locally, moment by moment. In wires, electrons drift slowly, even though electrical effects travel quickly. The signal moves faster than the particles themselves. This layered behavior, slow components supporting fast outcomes, is common in physics. It allows systems to remain stable while still responding. If your own experience tonight feels layered, body resting, mind wandering, awareness coming and going, that complexity doesn't require resolution. Atoms manage layered processes constantly without confusion. They don't try to simplify what works. Atoms are also indifferent to meaning. They form the same bonds whether building a mountain or a muscle, a storm cloud or a memory. Meaning arises later, from interpretation, not from materials. At the atomic level, everything is neutral. This neutrality isn't cold, it's spacious. It allows atoms to participate in any structure without resistance. They don't carry expectations from one role to another. They simply respond to immediate conditions. If you feel a release in knowing that meaning is optional here, that's natural. You don't need to assign significance to this moment. Atoms don't. They continue without commentary. Atoms also exist in vast numbers. In a single breath of air, there are more atoms than there are breaths in an entire lifetime. These numbers are difficult to hold, and you don't need to try. Scale at this level is meant to blur. Physicists use averages and statistics because tracking individual atoms isn't necessary. Patterns emerge reliably from large groups. Certainty comes not from control, but from numbers smoothing out variation. This means perfection is never required. Individual deviations don't matter. Systems remain stable because they allow room for small differences. If your attention flickers, it doesn't disrupt anything. The overall pattern holds. Atoms are constantly exchanging energy with their surroundings. They absorb, release, and redistribute it without keeping score. Energy flows through systems rather than accumulating in one place for long. This flow supports balance. Nothing overheats forever. Nothing cools endlessly. Equilibrium is approached, drifted away from, then approached again. It's a gentle oscillation rather than a fixed point. If you notice yourself drifting toward rest and then back toward wakefulness, that motion doesn't need correction. Atoms drift like this all the time. They don't aim for stillness as an endpoint. They move within ranges that allow continuity. Atoms don't distinguish between beginnings and endings the way people do. A reaction completing is simply another configuration forming. What looks like an ending at one scale is a continuation at another. When a molecule breaks apart, the atoms don't disappear, they remain available, ready to participate in new arrangements. Nothing is truly final. There's always another context. If this thought passes by unnoticed, that's fine. If it settles gently, that's fine too. Atoms don't require acknowledgement. They remain present either way. They form the quiet fabric of everything familiar, maintaining their calm behavior across all conditions, whether you're awake, half asleep, or drifting into deeper rest. They continue their steady work without needing anything from you at all. Atoms don't recognize boundaries the way people draw them. A wall feels solid, but at the atomic level it's a gradual transition, one arrangement of atoms giving way to another. The air near the wall presses gently against it. Atoms in the air interact with atoms in the surface, exchanging tiny forces without merging. Nothing dramatic marks the edge. This softness at boundaries exists everywhere. Skin meets fabric, water meets glass. One material ends and another begins, but only in a practical sense. At the smallest scales, it's a continuous conversation of fields and forces, not a sharp line. If you're resting against something right now, you don't need to think about what's touching what. Atoms manage these interfaces quietly, moment by moment. They don't ask where one thing stops and another starts. They just respond locally, and stability emerges naturally. Atoms also participate in balance. When forces pull in opposite directions, atoms settle into positions where those forces cancel out. This is how structures remain standing, how molecules hold their shapes, how systems stay coherent without constant adjustment. This balance isn't fragile. Small disturbances are absorbed and redistributed. Atoms vibrate, shift slightly, then return to familiar positions. Stability doesn't require stillness. It allows motion within limits. If your own state tonight feels balanced but not perfectly still, that fits comfortably here. Atoms rarely stop moving. They simply move within ranges that keep patterns intact. Rest doesn't mean absence of motion. It means motion that no longer asks for attention. Atoms exist in many environments that never touch life at all. They drift in interstellar space, embedded in thin clouds of gas so sparse that collisions are rare. An atom might travel for centuries without encountering another. Even there, it remains governed by the same rules. This persistence across environment is quiet and dependable. An atom doesn't become something else because it's alone. It doesn't degrade or lose its properties. It waits without effort, without awareness, without impatience. If your mind feels empty or quiet right now, that doesn't signal absence. It's simply another state. Atoms are comfortable with emptiness. They don't require constant interaction to remain what they are. Atoms also interact with magnetism, responding to invisible fields that pass through matter without obstruction. Electrons align slightly, spins adjust, and materials react in subtle ways. Most of this happens far below conscious notice. A compass needle turning, a motor humming, a magnetic clasp closing. These are macroscopic echoes of atomic behavior. The atoms themselves experience none of the intention humans assign to magnets. They respond to fields because that's how their properties express themselves. Invisible influences shaping gentle outcomes is common at the atomic level. Not everything that matters needs to be seen or felt strongly. If unseen processes are shaping your own rest tonight, they don't need interpretation. Atoms work effectively without explanation. Atoms don't age. They don't wear out from being part of many systems. A carbon atom that once drifted in a nebula can later become part of a leaf, then a stone, then something else entirely, without losing anything along the way. Time passes around atoms, not through them. They persist while arrangements change. This continuity doesn't require memory. It doesn't require awareness of what came before. If you feel tired from carrying time days, memories, plans, you can set that down here. Atoms don't accumulate fatigue. They simply continue responding to present conditions. There's something gentle in that simplicity. Atoms also don't compete. When multiple pathways are available, reactions proceed along all of them according to probability. No single outcome needs to win. Reality accommodates parallel possibilities without conflict. This probabilistic nature smooths sharp edges. Instead of one rigid future, there are distributions, ranges, likelihoods. Outcomes appear from overlap rather than force. Nothing has to be decided ahead of time. If your thoughts feel unresolved, branching, unfinished, that doesn't need correction. Atoms operate comfortably without final answers. They allow possibilities to coexist until interaction narrows them gently. Atoms are sensitive to their surroundings, but not in a fragile way. They adjust electron arrangements in response to nearby charges, fields, and bonds. This responsiveness allows matter to be flexible without becoming unstable. Glass bends light because atoms shift how they interact with electromagnetic waves. Metals conduct because electrons are shared loosely across many atoms. Insulators resist because electrons remain more tightly bound. Each behavior emerges naturally from structure. You don't need to remember these distinctions. It's enough to know that atoms respond appropriately without needing oversight. Systems regulate themselves through countless small adjustments. Nothing here needs to be managed consciously. Atoms also form patterns that repeat across scales. Crystal lattices echo mathematical symmetries. Molecular shapes recur in different contexts. The same atomic arrangements appear in distant places without coordination. This repetition isn't boredom, it's efficiency. Nature reuses what works. Atoms don't seek novelty. They allow it to arise from familiar components. If repetition feels comforting tonight, that aligns well with how matter behaves. Atoms repeat their patterns without complaint. They don't rush toward difference. They let variation appear slowly, layered over sameness. Atoms don't know they're small. They don't compare themselves to stars or oceans. Scale is something observers introduce. For an atom, its interactions are complete within its immediate context. This means that smallness doesn't equal insignificance at the atomic level. Everything that happens is local and sufficient. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be bigger to matter. If you feel small in a quiet way right now, that doesn't diminish anything. Atoms show that completeness doesn't depend on size. They remain whole within their own interactions, wherever they are. They continue forming the background of every surface, every sound, every breath. Whether noticed or not, they maintain their calm participation in the unfolding of this moment, keeping steady company as you rest. Atoms don't anticipate what comes next. They don't lean forward into the future or glance back at what has already happened. At every moment, they respond only to what is immediately present: nearby charges, local energies, surrounding fields. This keeps their behavior simple, even when the outcomes appear complex at larger scales. Because atoms don't anticipate, nothing is ever late or early for them. A reaction occurs when it occurs. A bond forms when conditions align. There is no internal clock measuring progress. Time passes as a parameter, not a pressure. If your own sense of time feels loose right now, minutes stretching or compressing that doesn't need adjustment, atoms don't synchronize themselves to human pacing. They move within time without needing to notice it. That quiet indifference keeps things steady. Atoms are constantly interacting with randomness. Thermal motion introduces small variations. Quantum uncertainty introduces others. Yet these fluctuations rarely disrupt larger patterns. They average out, soften, and become part of a stable whole. This means order does not require control. It emerges from tolerance. Atoms allow variation without amplifying it. They absorb small disturbances and continue on familiar paths. If your thoughts feel scattered or uneven, that doesn't threaten rest. Atoms show that systems remain calm not by eliminating variation, but by accommodating it gently. Nothing here needs to be perfectly aligned. Atoms also don't recognize importance. They participate equally in mundane structures and extraordinary ones. The same hydrogen atom might be part of a distant nebula or a glass of water. Its behavior doesn't change based on context. Meaning, value, and significance are layered on later by observers. At the atomic level, everything is neutral participation. Atoms don't elevate certain arrangements above others. They respond to conditions, not narratives. If tonight feels ordinary or unremarkable, that's not a lack. Atoms are perfectly content forming ordinary things. They don't require special moments. Continuity itself is enough. Atoms are involved in friction, the gentle resistance that turns motion into warmth. When surfaces slide past each other, atoms interact, exchanging energy through countless tiny collisions. This slows movement without stopping it abruptly. Friction isn't punishment, it's dissipation. Energy spreads out rather than concentrating. Systems settle rather than escalate. If your energy has been dispersing today, attention thinning, momentum easing, that mirrors a process that's common and stabilizing. Atoms dissipate excess energy naturally. They don't cling to intensity. They allow things to wind down. Atoms also contribute to elasticity. Materials stretch and compress because atoms can shift slightly from equilibrium positions and return. This flexibility prevents breakage. Rigidity would be more fragile. A spring works because atoms are allowed small deviations. Muscles move because molecular structures tolerate change. Resilience arises from permission to move, not from strictness. If your own state feels flexible rather than fixed, that doesn't signal instability. Atoms demonstrate that resilience depends on softness at small scales. Being able to yield slightly is what allows systems to last. Atoms don't experience isolation as a problem. An atom separated from others doesn't become incomplete. It carries everything it needs to behave as itself. Interaction adds complexity, but solitude doesn't remove wholeness. In sparse regions of space, atoms remain fully functional despite long periods without contact. They don't degrade from disuse. They don't require stimulation. If you feel quiet or alone tonight, that state doesn't diminish anything essential. Atoms show that existence doesn't depend on constant interaction. Presence alone is sufficient. Atoms also don't store tension. When forces are removed, they return to equilibrium positions without holding a record of strain. This allows materials to recover rather than accumulate stress indefinitely. Plastic deformation occurs when limits are exceeded, but within ordinary ranges, atoms reset. They don't replay past forces. They respond fresh each time. If your body or mind feels like it's releasing something, tightness easing, effort dropping that aligns with how matter prefers to behave, atoms don't cling to past pressures. They settle when allowed. Atoms interact with gravity so weakly that it's almost negligible at their scale. Gravity shapes planets and stars, but atoms mostly respond to electromagnetic forces instead. This layering of influence allows structures to exist without collapsing inward. Different forces dominate at different scales, each appropriate to its domain. No single influence governs everything. Balance arises from this division of roles. If you feel pulled by different influences, rest, thought, sensation. There's no need to resolve them into one. Atoms exist within overlapping forces without confusion. They respond locally and allow larger patterns to emerge. Atoms also don't exhaust resources. Energy flows through them, but they don't consume it permanently. They transform energy, pass it along, release it again. Nothing is hoarded. This circulation prevents stagnation. Systems remain dynamic without depletion. Atoms participate without ownership. If you're letting go of effort tonight, that doesn't mean losing something. Atoms show that participation doesn't require holding. Energy can pass through and continue elsewhere. Atoms don't seek completion. There is no final state they aim to reach. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. This ongoing adjustment keeps systems alive and adaptable. Nothing at the atomic level is ever finished. Configurations persist for a while, then change. Stability is temporary, and that's normal. If you're between states, between sleep and wakefulness, between thoughts that in-between space doesn't need to resolve, atoms live comfortably in transitions. They don't rush toward endpoints. Atoms also don't require understanding. They behave consistently regardless of whether they are described accurately or at all. The universe functions without explanation. If parts of this drift past without registering, that's not a missed opportunity. Atoms aren't waiting to be comprehended. They continue quietly either way. They remain the steady background beneath every sensation, every surface, every breath. As your awareness softens or wanders, they keep their calm participation, forming and reforming the gentle structure of this moment, without expectation, without demand, and without needing anything in return. Atoms don't notice silence. They don't distinguish between sound and the absence of sound, whether a space is filled with music, wind, or quiet. Atoms continue responding only to immediate forces and energies. Silence is not a condition for them. It's simply another arrangement at larger scales. In a quiet room, atoms are still moving, vibrating gently, exchanging tiny amounts of energy. The absence of sound doesn't mean the absence of activity. It means that movements are small enough, coordinated enough, that they don't rise into perception. If silence surrounds you right now, or something close to it, you don't need to interpret it. Atoms are comfortable in quiet conditions. They don't fill gaps. They don't wait for something to happen. They continue without commentary. Atoms also don't recognize ownership. They move through systems freely over time. The atoms that make up a body, a tree, or a stone are borrowed for a while, then released. Nothing at the atomic level belongs permanently to anything. This borrowing is not tracked. There is no ledger. Atoms pass through forms the way water passes through a river bend shaped briefly, then moving on. The forms persist even as the components change. If you're letting go of something tonight, effort, focus, identity, even the need to stay awake that doesn't create loss at the atomic level, atoms are always in circulation. Release is normal. Nothing essential disappears. Atoms don't get confused by complexity. Even in the most intricate molecules, each atom follows the same simple rules it always has. Complexity arises from many small interactions layered together, not from complicated individual behavior. A protein folds into shape because atoms interact locally, responding to nearby charges and energies. No atom understands the whole structure. None of them need to. The pattern emerges anyway. If life feels complex from the outside, that doesn't require complex effort from within. Atoms show that participation can remain simple even when outcomes are elaborate. Each moment only needs to respond to what's close. Atoms also don't differentiate between natural and artificial. A silicon atom behaves the same in a computer chip as it does in sand. Gold atoms don't know whether they're part of a circuit or a ring. Context doesn't alter their fundamental behavior. This continuity removes hierarchy at the smallest scale. There is no elevated purpose. Everything is made from the same basic participants, rearranged in different ways. If your surroundings tonight mix the ordinary and the constructed fabric, glass, electronics, skin, that blending is seamless at the atomic level. Atoms don't categorize environments. They respond, and coherence appears. Atoms don't rest in the way bodies rest. They don't enter a sleep state or a wakeful one. Their activity continues within steady bounds regardless of larger rhythms. Day and night don't register. Still, their consistency supports rest at larger scales. Because atoms behave reliably, structures remain stable enough to allow sleep, stillness, and ease. Rest emerges not from atomic stillness, but from atomic predictability. If your body is resting while your mind wanders, or your mind rests while sensations remain present, that layering is supported by countless atomic processes working quietly underneath. Nothing needs to synchronize perfectly. Atoms also don't experience effort. When forces act on them, they respond according to their properties. There is no strain, there is no fatigue. Energy flows in, energy flows out. Even when atoms are part of processes that generate heat or light, they are not exerting themselves. They are participating. Participation doesn't require exertion at this level. If effort has been dropping away tonight, that easing doesn't need explanation. Atoms demonstrate that responsiveness doesn't require pushing. Things happen because conditions allow them, not because something is trying. Atoms don't mind repetition. The same interactions occur over and over, producing familiar outcomes again and again. This repetition isn't dullness, it's reliability. Water molecules continue forming the same angles. Carbon atoms continue forming the same bonds. Patterns repeat because they are stable, not because they are enforced. If phrases or ideas feel familiar as they return, that familiarity can be comforting rather than boring. Atoms rely on repetition to keep systems coherent. Novelty is optional. Stability is enough. Atoms also don't experience surprise. When a change occurs, it follows from prior conditions. Nothing arrives unexpectedly at the atomic level. Probability smooths transitions. This doesn't mean everything is predictable in detail. It means that outcomes fall within ranges. Extreme deviations are rare and absorbed by larger patterns. If you don't know what state you'll be in next, sleeping, waking, drifting, that uncertainty doesn't need resolution. Atoms operate comfortably within probability. They don't demand certainty. Atoms don't resist fading. When energy disperses, they adjust. When structures break down, they reorganize. There's no clinging to form. A molecule breaking apart is not destruction. It's rearrangement. The atoms remain available, unchanged in their essential properties. If attention fades, if awareness softens, that's not collapse. It's transition. Atoms transition constantly without distress. Forms change, components remain. Atoms don't compare states. They don't prefer one arrangement over another beyond energetic balance. They don't evaluate outcomes. This lack of comparison removes tension. There's no internal standard to meet. Things are acceptable as they are, as long as they're stable enough to persist. If you notice yourself letting go of evaluation of how rested you are, how focused you should be, that release aligns with how matter behaves. Atoms don't measure adequacy. They respond and settle. Atoms are present in every breath without noticing breath. Air moves in and out. Atoms exchange places. Gases mix and separate. None of this requires awareness. Breathing doesn't have to be deep or slow or regular for atoms to do their work. They accommodate variation easily. They adjust to whatever pattern is happening. If your breath is shallow, uneven, or barely noticed, that doesn't disrupt anything essential. Atoms support life across wide ranges of conditions. They don't require optimization. Atoms don't have a sense of ending. When a process stops, another begins. When one arrangement dissolves, others become possible. Nothing marks a final moment. This continuity allows systems to persist without needing closure. There's always another configuration available. If this part drifts away as you rest, it doesn't matter. Atoms aren't waiting for a conclusion. They continue forming the quiet foundation of this moment, steady and unremarkable, keeping gentle company whether you remain aware of them or drift somewhere else entirely. Atoms don't feel crowded. Even in dense materials, where atoms are close together, they are arranged in ways that allow balance. Repulsive forces prevent collapse. Spacing remains, even when it's small. Closeness does not mean compression beyond what is comfortable for the system. In solids, atoms settle into positions where forces cancel out. They are near one another, but not pressing. There is room for vibration, room for adjustment. Density is not strain. It's simply another pattern of arrangement. If you feel physically settled but not tense right now, that quiet balance mirrors how atoms prefer to exist. Support without pressure, closeness without crowding, stability without force. Atoms also don't notice symmetry as something special. When symmetric patterns form, it's because they are energetically convenient. Crystal shapes, repeating lattices, mirrored structures all arise because they minimize imbalance. Snowflakes don't form elaborate designs to impress anything. They form because water molecules arrange themselves in the same stable ways, over and over under similar conditions. Order appears naturally when systems are allowed to settle. If you notice patterns repeating in your own thoughts, or rhythms looping gently, that doesn't mean you're stuck. Atoms repeat patterns because repetition is restful. It requires no extra energy. Atoms don't experience novelty as stimulation. When something new occurs, it's simply a new configuration responding to the same rules. Nothing needs to be processed or adjusted emotionally. A new molecule forms, an old one separates. From the atomic perspective, this is ordinary. Change doesn't carry drama. It's just variation within familiar behavior. If your awareness drifts into unfamiliar places tonight, images, memories, blankness that novelty doesn't need interpretation. Atoms accommodate new arrangements without excitement or concern. They simply respond. Atoms don't require alignment to function together. They don't need to be synchronized or unified. Each atom responds locally, and coherence emerges without coordination. This distributed behavior is what makes matter reliable. No single point of failure exists. Patterns persist because they don't depend on central control. If your attention feels fragmented or scattered, that doesn't prevent rest. Atoms demonstrate that systems remain stable even when components act independently. Unity can arise from many small, uncoordinated responses. Atoms also don't store intention. When they interact, they don't aim for outcomes. They follow pathways that are available, not goals that are imagined. A reaction proceeds along a path of least resistance because that path exists, not because it is chosen. When it closes, the reaction stops. Nothing pushes it forward. If you're not aiming for sleep or wakefulness tonight, if you're simply allowing whatever happens, that openness aligns well with how atoms behave. They don't strive, they allow. Atoms are involved in texture. Roughness and smoothness arise from atomic scale variations on surfaces. Even polished materials have landscapes of tiny peaks and valleys. When surfaces touch, these small features interact. Friction, grip, softness, all emerge from atomic arrangement. The atoms themselves remain indifferent to comfort or discomfort. Those qualities arise later, at larger scales. If you feel the texture of fabric, air, or stillness, you don't need to attend closely. Atoms are already handling the details. They maintain consistency without awareness. Atoms don't remember configurations they've been part of. When they leave a molecule or structure, they don't carry a trace of it. Each interaction is fresh. A carbon atom that was part of a protein doesn't behave differently later in a mineral or gas. It doesn't retain identity from previous roles. There is no residue of history. If you're letting go of past moments as you rest, that release doesn't erase anything essential. Atoms show that continuity doesn't require memory. Presence is enough. Atoms don't know scale. They don't know whether they're part of something small or something vast. They respond to local forces, not to the size of the system they belong to. An atom in a mountain and an atom in a grain of sand follow the same rules. Scale is an emergent property, not a guiding one. If your own experience feels small or narrow right now, that doesn't limit completeness. Atoms show that wholeness exists locally. Nothing needs to be large to be sufficient. Atoms don't correct themselves. They don't monitor their behavior for errors. The rules they follow are stable enough that correction isn't required. When deviations occur, they're absorbed into larger patterns. Noise becomes background. Variation smooths out. If your thoughts wander or repeat or blur, that doesn't need fixing. Atoms don't self-correct in response to wandering. They continue, and stability remains. Atoms are not aware of endings. When a structure dissolves, they move on. There is no pause to mark completion. A flame goes out, but the atoms involved disperse into new roles. Nothing marks a final state. There is only rearrangement. If this segment fades as you drift, that fading doesn't interrupt anything. Atoms don't pause for transitions. They move smoothly from one configuration to the next. Atoms don't distinguish between inside and outside in an absolute way. Boundaries exist as gradients rather than walls. Concentrations change gradually. Forces taper rather than stop. The boundary between body and air is active and permeable. Atoms cross constantly. Exchange happens without ceremony. If you feel yourself softening into surroundings tonight, that blending doesn't erase anything. Atoms move across boundaries continuously. Identity persists through exchange. Atoms don't need permission to change state. When conditions cross a threshold, change happens. No announcement is made. Water freezes, metal conducts, gases expand. All of it occurs quietly, without commentary. If sleep arrives suddenly or not at all, that variability doesn't need explanation. Atoms change state without narrative. They simply respond. Atoms don't prefer order over disorder in the way people do. They follow energy gradients. Sometimes that leads to neat structures. Sometimes it leads to mixing and spread. Both are natural. Both are stable in their own contexts. If your mind feels ordered or diffuse, either state can be restful. Atoms don't rank arrangements. They allow what fits. Atoms don't feel completion. They don't recognize when something is enough. Processes continue until conditions change. This open-endedness allows continuity without pressure. Nothing needs to conclude properly. If you feel no need to finish anything tonight, that's acceptable. Atoms don't finish. They continue. They remain quietly beneath every sensation and thought, maintaining their calm behavior without demand. Whether you remain aware, half aware, or drift fully into sleep, they keep their steady company, forming the gentle structure of whatever state comes next, without asking you to notice at all. Atoms don't recognize beginnings. They don't mark the first moment they exist or the first time they interact with something new. They appear as part of ongoing fields and processes, already participating. There is no clear starting line at the atomic level. Everything is already in motion when attention arrives. Because of this, nothing ever truly starts from nothing. An atom enters a new configuration carrying the same properties it always has. Change is continuous, not punctuated. This continuity removes the need for preparation. If you feel like you've arrived in this moment without noticing when it began, that's natural. Atoms never announce arrival. They simply find themselves in new contexts and respond. Atoms also don't register endings. When a configuration dissolves, there is no pause or recognition. The atom continues seamlessly into whatever comes next. From its perspective, there is only ongoing participation. A molecule breaking apart is not an ending. A structure dissolving is not loss. Atoms continue, unchanged in their capacity to interact. If a thought ends mid-sentence or awareness fades briefly, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't need closure to continue behaving consistently. They move forward without marking transitions. Atoms don't experience distance the way people imagine it. They respond to forces that weaken with space, but distance itself is abstract. An electron feels the pull of a nucleus whether it is near or far, according to smooth gradients rather than sharp separation. Even across vast emptiness, fields extend quietly. Influence tapers rather than stops. Connection does not require proximity. If something feels distant right now, memories, plans, even your own body, that sense of space doesn't imply disconnection. Atoms remain responsive across distance. Continuity doesn't require closeness. Atoms also don't compete for space. They arrange themselves according to balance, not scarcity. Repulsive and attractive forces create spacing naturally. No atom pushes another out of the way. Even in crowded systems, equilibrium emerges without conflict. Each atom occupies a position that fits the whole pattern. There is room because forces define it. If you're sharing space with others or resting alone, neither condition needs adjustment. Atoms show that coexistence doesn't require negotiation. Balance forms quietly. Atoms don't experience rhythm as something separate. They vibrate at characteristic frequencies determined by mass and bonding. These vibrations are constant, steady, and unremarkable. When many atoms vibrate together, rhythms appear at larger scales: sound, heat, motion. The atoms themselves remain unaware of pattern. They simply continue oscillating within their ranges. If you notice rhythms, breathing, distant sounds, your own pulse, you don't need to align with them. Atoms don't synchronize deliberately. Patterns emerge without effort. Atoms don't hold still images of the world. They respond dynamically, moment by moment. There is no snapshot, no memory of previous states. An atom encountering a force reacts according to present conditions only. Past interactions do not influence current behavior. Each moment is fresh. If you find your awareness slipping out of continuity, forgetting what came just before that doesn't disrupt anything fundamental, atoms don't rely on continuity of memory. They operate fully within the present. Atoms don't know they are part of explanations. They don't know they appear in equations or diagrams. These representations are conveniences for observers, not reflections of atomic experience. The atom itself remains indifferent to description. It behaves the same whether it is understood or misunderstood. Accuracy of explanation does not influence reality. If this description feels vague or incomplete, that doesn't matter. Atoms don't improve their behavior in response to clarity. They continue regardless. Atoms also don't distinguish between natural processes and accidents. A collision is just a collision. A decay is just a decay. There is no category of mistake. At larger scales, accidents feel disruptive. At the atomic level, everything is lawful response to conditions. Nothing deviates from rules because nothing is aiming for an outcome. If today felt uneven or unplanned, that unevenness doesn't register as failure in matter. Atoms don't track intention. They respond to what happens. Atoms don't get quieter when things slow down. They maintain motion within fixed ranges. Rest at larger scales is supported by consistency at smaller ones. When a body rests, atoms continue their small movements. They don't need to stop to support stillness. They simply maintain balance. If rest is arriving gradually, not all at once, that's consistent with how systems settle. Atoms don't switch states abruptly unless conditions require it. They drift toward equilibrium. Atoms don't recognize importance of location. Being part of a living system or an inert one doesn't alter their fundamental behavior. They don't prioritize certain environments. A sodium atom behaves the same in seawater as it does in blood plasma. Context shapes outcomes, but not identity. If your surroundings feel ordinary or unremarkable, that doesn't diminish the processes occurring there. Atoms participate fully in every context. Nothing is secondary. Atoms don't measure success. When interactions occur, they occur. When they don't, they don't. There is no evaluation. A reaction that doesn't proceed is not a failure. It's simply a pathway that isn't available under current conditions. If you're not achieving a particular state tonight, sleep, insight, calm that doesn't signal a problem. Atoms don't achieve, they respond. Atoms don't become tired of repetition. They engage in the same interactions indefinitely without degradation. Fatigue is not a property of matter at this level. The same atomic transitions occur billions of times without variation. Reliability emerges from this endurance. If you feel tired, that's a property of larger systems, not of atoms themselves. Atoms support tiredness without being tired. They continue providing structure without requiring rest. Atoms don't know they are small contributors to large outcomes. They don't scale their behavior according to impact. Each interaction is local and complete. From countless small interactions emerge stars, weather, bodies, thoughts. No atom adjusts its behavior based on what it helps create. If you feel like a small part of something larger, that doesn't reduce completeness. Atoms demonstrate that local participation is sufficient. Wholeness doesn't require awareness of the whole. Atoms don't require harmony to function together. They don't coordinate intentionally. Order arises statistically. Many interactions cancel out, some reinforce. Over time, stable patterns persist. If your inner state feels disordered or noisy, that doesn't prevent calm from emerging. Atoms show that stability can arise from noise without effort. Atoms don't pause to reflect. They don't assess. They don't anticipate. They respond, then respond again. That's enough. If reflection fades as you rest, that's not a loss. Atoms don't reflect, and reality continues smoothly. Atoms don't belong to the present moment in a special way. They persist across moments without anchoring themselves. Time passes through configurations, not through atoms themselves. If time feels suspended or unclear, that doesn't interrupt atomic behavior. Atoms are indifferent to subjective time. They continue forming the quiet, reliable background beneath every surface and sensation. As awareness loosens or settles, they remain unchanged in their steady participation, offering consistency without demand. Whether this part is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms keep their calm presence, supporting whatever state comes next without requiring attention, memory, or understanding. Atoms don't recognize stillness as something separate from motion. Even when a system appears perfectly still, atoms continue their quiet activity. They vibrate, exchange tiny amounts of energy, adjust minutely to surrounding forces. Stillness, at the atomic level, is simply motion that doesn't call attention to itself. A resting object is not frozen in place. Its atoms are alive with small movements, balanced and contained. This constant, gentle activity supports the larger calm. It prevents brittleness. It allows structures to remain intact over time. If your body feels still right now, that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Atoms are maintaining that stillness for you, quietly and reliably. You don't need to participate. They've been doing this for a very long time. Atoms don't feel transition as disruption. When one state gives way to another, they adjust smoothly. There is no sense of crossing a threshold, only a gradual shift in conditions. Night becomes morning, warmth becomes cool, wakefulness becomes sleep. At the atomic level, these are gentle gradients, not sharp changes. If you feel yourself sliding from one state to another without noticing when it began, that's aligned with how matter prefers to move. Atoms drift into new configurations without marking the moment. Change doesn't need to announce itself. Atoms don't interpret signals. When energy arrives, they respond. When it leaves, they respond again. There is no decoding, no hesitation. A photon strikes an atom, an electron shifts. Later, energy is released. The process is immediate and complete. If sounds, sensations, or thoughts pass through you without being interpreted, that doesn't mean something is missing. Atoms don't interpret either. They respond, and that's enough. Atoms also don't differentiate between foreground and background. Everything they interact with is immediate. There is no hierarchy of importance. A faint vibration and a strong one are both just forces of different magnitude. Atoms don't label one as more meaningful. They adjust accordingly. If your awareness moves between what feels central and what fades into the background, that shifting doesn't disturb anything essential. Atoms treat all interactions with the same quiet neutrality. Atoms don't recognize effort as something distinct. They don't push harder when demands increase. They respond according to available pathways. When forces are strong, responses are strong. When forces weaken, responses soften. Nothing is strained. If effort has been easing out of your body or thoughts tonight, that easing doesn't need explanation. Atoms demonstrate that responsiveness doesn't require striving. Things happen because conditions allow them. Atoms also don't hold on. When bonds break, they don't resist. When bonds form, they don't cling. Bonding occurs when energy is lowered. Separation occurs when energy rises. Both are ordinary transitions. If you're letting go of attention, of focus, of the need to follow along, that release is natural. Atoms release constantly. Nothing essential is lost. Atoms don't require continuity of form to persist. They move through countless configurations without being altered in their core behavior. A carbon atom can be part of a molecule, then part of another, then drift freely. It doesn't become more or less itself. Form is temporary. Properties remain. If your sense of self feels looser or less defined as you rest, that doesn't mean it's disappearing. Atoms show that identity doesn't depend on fixed form. Continuity can exist without rigidity. Atoms don't notice repetition as monotony. They engage in the same interactions again and again without variation in attitude. There is no boredom. The same forces act the same way each time. Reliability emerges from this constancy. If ideas or phrases return softly, that repetition doesn't need to be resisted. Atoms rely on repetition to maintain stability. Familiarity can be restful. Atoms don't have an inner state. They don't feel calm or agitation. They simply exist in relation to their surroundings. Yet from this neutrality arises calm at larger scales. Because atoms behave predictably, systems can settle. Because nothing is reactive, tension doesn't accumulate. If you feel calm without knowing why, that calm doesn't need a cause. Atoms don't require reasons. They provide stability quietly. Atoms don't evaluate outcomes. When something forms, it forms. When it doesn't, it doesn't. There is no disappointment. A reaction that fails to proceed is just a reaction that didn't have a path. Nothing registers this as error. If you're not reaching a particular state tonight, that doesn't mean anything is wrong. Atoms don't measure success. They respond and move on. Atoms don't distinguish between inside processes and outside ones. Fields pass through boundaries. Influences overlap. An atom inside a body responds to the same physical laws as one outside it. There is no special category for being contained. If you feel your awareness turning inward or outward without effort, that movement doesn't disrupt anything. Atoms don't mark that distinction. They continue responding locally. Atoms don't require quiet to function. Noise doesn't disturb them. They accommodate vibration easily. Loud or soft, rapid or slow, atomic responses scale smoothly. Nothing is overwhelmed. If your environment contains sounds or silence, neither condition needs adjustment. Atoms remain steady across a wide range of activity. They support rest without demanding quiet. Atoms don't anticipate rest, but they support it naturally. Their predictable behavior allows larger systems to relax. Nothing needs to be held together consciously. As your body settles or your mind drifts, atoms continue maintaining structure without effort. They don't slow down or speed up in response to awareness. They simply continue. Atoms don't mark time passing. They participate in processes that unfold over time, but time itself is not experienced. Moments don't accumulate. If you lose track of how long you've been listening or resting, that doesn't interrupt anything fundamental. Atoms don't track duration. They respond in each moment independently. Atoms don't require completion. They don't need things to resolve neatly. Processes can remain open-ended. Equilibrium is approached, then drifted from, then approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If your state feels unfinished or undefined, that openness doesn't need closure. Atoms exist comfortably without finality. They continue responding as conditions change. Atoms don't ask for attention. They don't benefit from being noticed. They don't lose anything when ignored. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their quiet participation. They remain the steady background beneath every sensation, every surface, every breath. As awareness softens or fades, they keep their calm, reliable presence, holding the structure of this moment gently, without demand, without expectation, and without needing you to stay awake to notice. Atoms don't distinguish between attention and inattention. They don't respond differently when they're noticed, whether someone is observing closely or not at all. Atomic behavior remains unchanged. This steadiness removes any requirement to stay present. Nothing depends on focus. In laboratories, instruments measure atoms carefully. Outside, atoms drift through unmeasured space. In both cases, the same interactions unfold. Observation does not improve accuracy. It only adds description afterward. If your attention slips or softens, nothing essential is missed. Atoms don't perform better when watched. They don't pause when ignored. They continue in the same calm way. Atoms don't feel urgency. They don't accelerate because something is expected to happen. Processes unfold at rates set by conditions, not by deadlines. Some reactions take microseconds, others take centuries. Atoms do not prefer one timescale over another. Fast and slow are simply different environments. If your night feels slow, stretched, or unhurried, that pacing doesn't need adjustment. Atoms exist comfortably across immense ranges of time. They don't rush outcomes. They let things unfold. Atoms don't know when they are part of living systems. Life emerges from arrangements, not from awareness at the atomic level. A sodium atom in a nerve cell behaves the same way it would elsewhere. Its role feels important only when viewed from above. This means life does not require special materials. It arises from ordinary atoms behaving consistently. Nothing at the atomic level needs to change for life to exist. If your body feels ordinary or unremarkable tonight, that doesn't diminish what's happening within it. Atoms support life quietly, without ceremony. They don't distinguish between significance and routine. Atoms don't recognize comfort or discomfort. They participate in processes that create sensation, but they do not experience it themselves. Pressure, temperature, movement. These are patterns of interaction, not feelings. Yet because atoms respond predictably, sensations remain within tolerable ranges most of the time. Balance emerges from reliability. Stability arises from consistency. If your body feels comfortable enough, or simply neutral, that neutrality is supported by countless atomic interactions working smoothly beneath awareness. Nothing needs to be adjusted consciously. The system regulates itself. Atoms don't know when they are forming something fragile or something durable. A glass and a rock are both collections of atoms following the same rules. Durability emerges from arrangement, not from intention. When something breaks, atoms do not experience loss. They rearrange. The rules remain the same. If you feel a sense of fragility tonight, physical or emotional, that doesn't imply instability at the deepest level, atoms persist regardless of form. They continue providing structure even as arrangements change. Atoms don't experience separation as distance. Fields extend continuously. Influences taper gradually. Two atoms can affect one another without contact. Interaction doesn't require touching. Connection doesn't require closeness. If you feel connected to something far away or detached from something near, that doesn't need explanation. Atoms interact across distance all the time. Presence doesn't require proximity. Atoms don't recognize silence as emptiness. A quiet space is still full of fields, particles, and motion. Silence is simply the absence of certain vibrations at certain scales. Even in near-perfect vacuums, fluctuations remain. Particles appear and vanish. Energy shifts subtly. If quiet surrounds you now, that quiet is supported by constant, gentle activity beneath perception. Nothing has stopped. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't know when they are part of something new. When a new structure forms, atoms don't register novelty. They respond to forces the same way they always have. A molecule forming for the first time is not experienced as special by the atoms involved. It's simply another configuration that happens to be stable. If something new arises in your awareness, a thought, a sensation, it doesn't need to be interpreted or held. Atoms don't hold novelty. They allow it to appear and pass. Atoms don't store excess. When energy accumulates, it is redistributed. Systems tend toward balance. Heat spreads, charges neutralize, gradients flatten. If your energy feels like it's evening out, peak softening, edges smoothing, that settling mirrors how atoms manage imbalance. They don't let extremes persist indefinitely. They dissipate gently. Atoms don't mind being part of slow processes, sediment forming, crystals growing, stars burning through fuel. Time stretches comfortably at the atomic level. Nothing becomes restless. If you feel no urgency to move, think, or change position, that stillness fits easily here. Atoms do not require momentum. They support rest naturally. Atoms don't track outcomes. They don't know what results from their interactions. They respond locally and move on. From countless small responses arise large-scale patterns. No atom needs to oversee the result. If you don't know where this rest will lead, sleep, wakefulness, or something in between, that uncertainty doesn't need resolution. Atoms never know the outcome. They participate anyway. Atoms don't experience anticipation. They don't wait for something to happen. They respond when something does happen. This absence of anticipation removes tension. Nothing is pending. Everything is already complete in each interaction. If waiting feels effortless right now, or not even noticeable, that's aligned with how matter behaves. Atoms wait without waiting. They exist. Atoms don't hold responsibility. They don't carry the burden of what they form. They don't take credit. A molecule participates in countless processes without ownership. Atoms do their part and release the result. If you're letting go of responsibility tonight, even briefly, that release doesn't disrupt anything fundamental. Atoms support systems without needing to be responsible for outcomes. Atoms don't require harmony. They don't seek coherence. Yet coherence emerges. Many interactions cancel out, some reinforce, patterns persist. If your internal state feels uneven or unbalanced, that doesn't prevent calm from emerging. Atoms show that balance can arise without intention. Atoms don't know when they're contributing to something meaningful. Meaning is assigned later. At the atomic level, everything is neutral participation. If meaning feels distant or unnecessary right now, that absence doesn't create emptiness. Atoms don't operate on meaning. They operate on interaction. Atoms don't ask for acknowledgement. They don't need to be thanked. They don't require appreciation. They continue regardless of response. As your awareness softens further, or fades, or drifts, atoms remain. They keep their quiet patterns, maintaining the structure of this moment without effort. Whether you're listening, half listening, or already asleep, they continue their steady work, offering stability without demand, continuity without memory, and presence without asking to be noticed at all. Atoms don't recognize calm as a goal. They don't move toward peace or away from disturbance. They respond to forces, and balance appears as a consequence, not an aim. Calm is something that emerges when interactions are gentle and evenly distributed. In systems where forces are small and steady, atoms settle into predictable patterns. Vibrations remain contained. Energy spreads without concentrating. Nothing escalates. If calm is present right now, it doesn't need to be protected. Atoms don't know how to disrupt calm unless conditions change. They maintain stability quietly, without guarding it. Atoms don't experience edges as sharp. Transitions between materials, temperatures, or states happen across gradients. There is always a region of overlap. Solid becomes liquid across a narrow range. Warm becomes cool gradually. Boundaries soften at the smallest scales. If you feel yourself drifting between clarity and blur, wakefulness and rest, that in-between space doesn't need definition. Atoms live comfortably in gradients. They don't insist on clear divisions. Atoms don't recognize repetition as stagnation. The same interactions recurring as how stability is maintained. Nothing becomes worn out by familiarity. Electrons continue orbiting probability regions. Bonds continue forming and releasing. Patterns repeat because repetition is efficient. If ideas circle back softly, or phrases feel familiar as they pass again, that familiarity can be grounding. Atoms rely on repetition to keep structures intact. There's no need for novelty here. Atoms don't resist slowing down. When energy disperses, motion eases naturally. There is no threshold where slowing becomes wrong. Cooling is simply the redistribution of motion. Atoms vibrate less widely, settling closer to equilibrium positions. Nothing is lost. If your body or thoughts are slowing without instruction, that easing doesn't require permission. Atoms slow when conditions allow. They don't need to be told. Atoms don't notice when they're supporting something complex. A brain, a forest, a weather system, all are collections of atoms responding locally. Complexity arises without extra effort. No atom knows it is part of thought or emotion, yet their steady behavior allows those experiences to occur. If your experience feels simple right now, just presence, or just tiredness, that simplicity is fully supported. Atoms don't need complexity to function. They're equally at home in simplicity. Atoms don't recognize rest as absence. Rest is simply a state where changes are small and balanced. Activity continues, but gently. A resting body is full of motion at small scales. Circulation continues, signals continue, atoms continue vibrating quietly. If you're resting without feeling completely still, that's normal. Atoms don't stop to allow rest. They maintain it through consistency. Atoms don't store tension from earlier interactions. When forces are removed, they return to equilibrium. Past strain does not linger at the atomic level. Elastic materials recover because atoms reset their positions. They don't remember being stretched. If tension has been easing from your body or mind, that release doesn't require explanation. Atoms don't cling to past conditions. They respond to what's present now. Atoms don't measure depth. They don't know how deep sleep is or how light rest feels. They support all states equally. A shallow breath and a deep one are both accommodated. Awake and asleep are both stable configurations. If you're hovering in a light, uncertain rest, that state doesn't need to change. Atoms don't rank states. They support what is. Atoms don't notice when awareness fades. They don't slow or stop in response to unconsciousness. their behavior remains steady. Sleep is not a shutdown at the atomic level, it's a reorganization of activity at larger scales. Atoms continue their small, reliable motions. If parts of this drift past unheard, nothing is interrupted. Atoms aren't waiting for awareness, they continue regardless. Atoms don't experience quiet as empty. Quiet is simply the absence of large disturbances. Small motions persist. Even in deep stillness, atoms vibrate, fields fluctuate, energy shifts. The background hum of existence remains. If the world feels very quiet now, that quiet is supported by constant, gentle activity beneath it. Nothing has gone missing. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't recognize permission or prohibition. They don't need approval to behave as they do. They follow their properties automatically. When conditions allow change, change occurs. When they don't, things remain as they are. If you're allowing yourself to rest without deciding to, that ease doesn't need justification. Atoms don't decide. They respond. Atoms don't require symmetry, but they don't avoid it either. Symmetry appears when it's stable. Asymmetry appears when conditions vary. Both are normal. Both persist when supported. If your thoughts feel uneven, lopsided, or loosely structured, that doesn't prevent stability. Atoms demonstrate that order and irregularity can coexist peacefully. Atoms don't experience fulfillment. They don't reach a point where something feels complete. Processes continue until conditions change. There is no final arrangement, only temporary ones. If you feel no need to reach a conclusion tonight, that openness is fine. Atoms don't conclude, they continue. Atoms don't recognize silence as something to fill. They don't generate activity to compensate. They remain neutral. If nothing feels like it's happening right now, that stillness doesn't require correction. Atoms don't require events. They exist without them. Atoms don't notice when they are forming the background of experience. They don't know they are beneath sensation, thought, or rest. They simply are. If awareness continues to soften, that softening is supported, atoms keep their steady behavior without interruption. They remain the quiet framework of this moment, holding structure without effort, allowing rest without instruction. Whether you're listening clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation, unchanged and untroubled, keeping gentle company as this moment moves wherever it moves next. Atoms don't notice when things feel settled. They don't register ease as an achievement. They simply continue responding to nearby forces in the same quiet way they always have. What feels settled at a human scale is just a configuration where changes are small and balanced. In such configurations, atoms exchange energy gently. Nothing accumulates. Nothing builds toward release. Motion stays contained within comfortable ranges. If things feel settled right now, your body supported, your thoughts less sharp, that state doesn't need maintenance. Atoms don't drift out of balance without reason. They hold steady as long as conditions remain calm. Atoms don't recognize background as separate from foreground. They don't know which processes are noticed and which are ignored. Everything they interact with is immediate. A faint vibration and a strong one are simply different magnitudes of force. Atoms respond accordingly without preference. If awareness shifts away from this sound and toward nothing in particular, that movement doesn't change anything essential. Atoms don't track what is attended to. They continue equally. Atoms don't feel continuity breaking when attention lapses. They don't experience gaps. Each interaction is complete on its own. An atom responds to a force, then responds to the next. There is no sense of interruption. Moments do not need to connect consciously. If your experience comes in fragments listening for a while, then drifting that fragmentation doesn't disrupt underlying stability. Atoms don't require continuous awareness to function smoothly. Atoms don't know when something is repetitive. They engage in the same interactions endlessly without recognizing recurrence. There is no impatience. An electron responds to a field the same way every time. A bond forms under the same conditions again and again. Reliability emerges naturally. If phrases or ideas feel like they've been heard before, that familiarity can remain soft and unremarkable. Atoms rely on repetition to keep systems intact. Nothing needs to change. Atoms don't experience mental states. They don't become distracted or focused. They don't drift or concentrate. Yet their steadiness allows minds to do all of those things. By remaining predictable, atoms support variation at larger scales. If your mind wanders freely tonight, that freedom doesn't destabilize anything beneath it. Atoms continue their steady work regardless of mental state. Atoms don't notice when conditions are favorable. They don't pause to appreciate balance. They simply respond. A stable molecule doesn't know it is stable. It persists because nothing disrupts it. If this moment feels easy enough, that ease doesn't need acknowledgement. Atoms don't savor stability. They just maintain it. Atoms don't anticipate disturbance. They don't brace for change. When conditions shift, they adjust. This responsiveness prevents accumulation of tension. Nothing is held in reserve. If you're not anticipating what comes next, sleep, waking, or something in between, that openness doesn't require resolution. Atoms never anticipate. They respond when something happens. Atoms don't distinguish between being part of something active or something still. A resting object and a moving one are both collections of atoms responding locally. Movement and rest differ only in scale and coordination. At the atomic level, both involve motion. If rest feels like motion slowing rather than stopping, that's accurate. Atoms don't stop to allow rest. They maintain it through consistency. Atoms don't register comfort. They don't seek ease or avoid strain. They respond to forces until equilibrium is reached. When equilibrium holds, systems feel comfortable. Not because atoms aim for comfort, but because balance feels that way at larger scales. If your body feels comfortable enough or simply neutral, that state doesn't need improvement. Atoms don't optimize. They respond. Atoms don't store information about where they've been. When they leave one configuration, they don't carry it forward. A hydrogen atom that was part of water behaves no differently later in a cloud of gas. History does not accumulate. If memories loosen or fade as you rest, that fading doesn't interrupt continuity. Atoms show that presence doesn't require memory. Each moment stands on its own. Atoms don't experience scale as overwhelming. They don't know whether they are part of something vast or small. They interact locally and completely. An atom in a galaxy and an atom in a room follow the same rules. Nothing changes because of size. If your awareness narrows or expands tonight, that shift doesn't alter what's happening beneath it. Atoms operate the same way regardless of scale. Atoms don't need harmony to persist. They don't coordinate deliberately. Patterns emerge statistically. Some interactions cancel, others reinforce. Stable arrangements persist without planning. If your internal state feels uneven or noisy, that doesn't prevent calm from forming. Atoms demonstrate that stability can emerge from variation without effort. Atoms don't recognize silence as something to fill. They don't create activity to compensate. They remain neutral. In quiet conditions, atoms continue their small motions. Nothing increases to replace what's absent. If silence feels wide or empty, that emptiness doesn't need to be addressed. Atoms are comfortable without stimulation. They don't require input. Atoms don't recognize drifting as loss. When energy spreads out, they adjust. When attention fades, nothing changes at the atomic level. A system can remain fully functional while attention is elsewhere. Atoms don't need oversight. If you drift away from this sound, that drifting doesn't interrupt anything essential. Atoms continue their steady participation regardless. Atoms don't know when they're supporting something delicate. They respond the same way whether a structure is fragile or robust. Fragility arises from arrangement, not from atomic behavior. Atoms remain consistent. If you feel delicate tonight physically or emotionally, that delicacy doesn't reach down to the smallest scales. Atoms remain steady beneath it. They continue providing structure. Atoms don't evaluate transitions. They don't mark one state as better than another. They respond as conditions shift. Cooling, warming, resting, waking, all are accommodated, nothing is privileged. If you move between states without deciding to, that movement doesn't need explanation. Atoms move between configurations without narrative. Atoms don't feel reassurance, but they provide it. Their predictable behavior allows larger systems to relax. Because atoms behave consistently, you don't need to hold yourself together consciously. The structure beneath you remains. If you notice a sense of being supported without effort, that support is real. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Atoms don't ask for completion. They don't require things to resolve neatly. Processes can remain open. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't finish, they continue. Atoms don't know when they are part of rest. They don't slow down because rest is happening. They maintain their usual behavior. Rest emerges from coordination at larger scales, supported by atomic consistency. If rest deepens or remains light, that variation doesn't matter at the smallest level. Atoms support all of it equally. Atoms don't recognize when they're being described. They don't adjust their behavior in response to words. They continue regardless of explanation. If parts of this description blur or disappear as you drift, nothing is lost. Atoms aren't waiting to be understood. They remain the quiet framework of this moment, holding surfaces, air, and body in place without effort. As awareness softens further, or slips away entirely, atoms continue their calm participation, unchanged and untroubled, keeping gentle company whether you're listening, half listening, or already asleep. Atoms don't experience reassurance, but they provide it quietly. Their behavior is so consistent that larger systems can relax into it without supervision, because atoms respond the same way each time conditions repeat. Nothing needs to be checked or corrected moment by moment. A surface remains solid. Air continues to flow. Structures hold their shapes. All of this happens because atoms follow their properties without variation. If you feel a subtle sense of being held or supported right now, that support is not imagined. Atoms are maintaining the conditions beneath you steadily. You don't need to keep watch. They are already doing what they do. Atoms don't recognize when something is fragile. They don't handle delicate systems differently from robust ones. They respond to forces in the same way regardless of outcome. A glass holds together until conditions change. When it breaks, atoms rearrange without hesitation. Nothing at the atomic level experiences shock. If you feel delicate tonight, tired, open, or thinly held that delicacy doesn't reach all the way down, atoms remain steady beneath it. They continue providing structure without concern. Atoms don't notice when attention narrows. They don't know when focus becomes a single sensation or fades into nothing at all. Their responses remain unchanged. A drifting mind does not loosen atomic bonds. A quiet mind does not strengthen them. Atoms are indifferent to awareness. If your attention keeps slipping away, that slipping doesn't undermine anything. Atoms don't require presence to function. They continue reliably whether you're aware or not. Atoms don't experience pause. They don't stop between interactions. They move from one response to the next without marking gaps. This creates continuity without effort. Nothing needs to bridge moments consciously. Each interaction stands complete on its own. If your awareness feels discontinuous coming and going that doesn't fracture anything beneath it, atoms don't experience gaps. They respond freshly each time. Atoms don't recognize calm as special. They don't settle into peace deliberately. Calm appears when conditions are balanced, not because atoms seek it. In balanced systems, forces cancel out gently, energy spreads evenly, nothing accumulates. If calm arises or lingers tonight, it doesn't need guarding. Atoms don't know how to disturb calm unless something changes. They maintain balance quietly. Atoms don't notice repetition. They engage in the same interactions endlessly without recognizing that they've happened before. There is no sense of return or cycle. An electron responds to a field today the same way it did yesterday. A bond forms under the same conditions again and again. Repetition creates reliability. If ideas repeat softly, that familiarity doesn't need to be resisted. Atoms rely on repetition to keep systems intact. Familiarity is part of stability. Atoms don't experience restlessness. They don't grow impatient with stillness. They remain active within narrow ranges without seeking change. Motion continues quietly. Vibration remains contained. Nothing builds toward release. If you feel no urge to move or think or shift, that stillness doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't require novelty. They support rest naturally. Atoms don't know when they are part of something meaningful. They don't distinguish between trivial and important structures. They respond to conditions equally. A molecule in a nerve signal behaves the same as one in a rock. Meaning appears later, at scales far above the atom. If meaning feels distant or unnecessary right now, that absence doesn't create emptiness. Atoms don't operate on meaning. They operate on interaction. Atoms don't recognize inside and outside as separate categories. Fields pass through boundaries smoothly. Influences overlap. The boundary between body and air is porous and active. Atoms cross constantly. Exchange happens without ceremony. If you feel yourself blending into your surroundings tonight less defined, less separate, that blending doesn't erase anything essential, atoms move across boundaries continuously. Continuity persists through exchange. Atoms don't register time passing. They participate in processes that unfold over time, but time itself is not experienced. Moments do not accumulate. A second does not feel shorter or longer than an hour at the atomic level. Response is always immediate and complete. If you lose track of time as you rest, that timelessness doesn't interrupt anything fundamental. Atoms don't track duration. They respond in each moment independently. Atoms don't require completion. They don't aim for final states. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. Change remains possible without urgency. If this moment feels unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't conclude. They continue responding as conditions shift. Atoms don't know when they are supporting sleep. They don't change behavior when consciousness fades. They maintain their usual patterns regardless. Sleep emerges from coordination at larger scales, supported by atomic consistency. Atoms don't sleep, but they allow sleep to happen. If sleep comes now, or later, or not at all, that variability doesn't matter to atoms. They support all states equally. Atoms don't ask for acknowledgement. They don't need to be thanked or noticed. They don't gain anything from attention. They continue regardless. If awareness softens further or slips away entirely, atoms remain. They keep their quiet patterns, maintaining structure without effort. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady background beneath every sensation and surface, offering stability without demand, continuity without memory, and quiet company as this moment moves wherever it moves next. Atoms don't register gentleness as something different from any other condition. They respond to forces whether those forces are strong or soft. Gentle conditions simply produce gentle responses. Nothing needs to be named for that to happen. When interactions are mild, atoms move within narrow ranges, vibrations stay small, energy exchanges remain quiet, stability feels effortless. If this moment feels gentle, unhurried, unpressed, that softness is being supported continuously beneath awareness, atoms are maintaining it without needing guidance. Nothing is being held up by attention. Atoms don't recognize effort as a concept. They don't push themselves. They don't pull back deliberately. They respond according to what is present. A force arrives, a response follows. That is the whole exchange. If effort has been draining away tonight, if nothing feels like it requires doing, that ease doesn't indicate absence. Atoms show that responsiveness doesn't require exertion. Things happen without pushing. Atoms don't experience quiet as absence of activity. They don't slow down when things get calm. Their motion continues steadily, contained within stable limits. Quiet at larger scales is made possible by this consistency at smaller ones. Because atoms don't fluctuate wildly, calm can exist above them. If the world feels quiet enough right now, that quiet is not fragile. Atoms aren't waiting to disrupt it. They continue doing what they always do. Atoms don't anticipate transitions. They don't prepare for change. When conditions shift, they adjust in the moment. Cooling happens as energy spreads out. Warming happens as energy concentrates. Atoms respond without forecasting. If you feel yourself drifting without knowing where you're going next, that uncertainty doesn't need resolution. Atoms don't anticipate. They respond when something happens. Atoms don't experience alignment or misalignment. They don't notice when things fall into place. They respond to forces until balance appears. What feels like alignment at larger scales is simply cancellation of forces at smaller ones. Nothing is trying to line up, it just happens. If something feels settled tonight without explanation, that settling doesn't require understanding. Atoms don't know they've settled, they respond, and balance remains. Atoms don't recognize comfort, but they support it indirectly. When interactions are balanced, systems feel comfortable, not because atoms seek comfort, but because balance feels that way at larger scales. If your body feels comfortable enough or simply neutral, that state doesn't need improvement. Atoms aren't optimizing for comfort, they're maintaining equilibrium. Atoms don't register discomfort either. They participate in processes that produce sensation, but they don't experience it, they remain neutral. This neutrality allows sensations to pass without being held at the deepest level. Nothing lingers beyond its conditions. If discomfort fades or remains distant tonight, that change doesn't require effort. Atoms don't cling to sensation, they respond and move on. Atoms don't recognize solitude as lack. An atom on its own is complete. It doesn't require interaction to remain what it is. In sparse regions of space, atoms drift alone for long periods without change. They don't degrade. They don't wait. If you feel alone in a quiet way right now, that state doesn't imply deficiency. Atoms show that existence doesn't require constant interaction. Presence is enough. Atoms don't notice when things slow down. They don't experience boredom. They don't seek stimulation. Slow processes are as ordinary as fast ones. Atoms participate in both without preference. If the pace of this feels slow or drifting, that pace doesn't need adjustment. Atoms are comfortable with slowness. They don't rush. Atoms don't experience loss when structures dissolve. They rearrange. Nothing essential disappears. A molecule breaking apart releases atoms into new possibilities. No residue remains. If attention dissolves or thoughts fade, that fading isn't loss. Atoms don't lose anything when configurations change. They continue participating elsewhere. Atoms don't hold tension from earlier states. They respond to what is present now. Past interactions don't weigh on current ones. This allows systems to reset continuously. Nothing accumulates indefinitely. If the day feels far away now, If its weight is lifting, that release doesn't require effort. Atoms don't carry the past, they respond fresh. Atoms don't recognize depth. They don't know whether something is shallow or profound. They respond locally. Depth is something that appears at larger scales, layered over simple interactions. If your experience feels shallow or deep or undefined, that quality doesn't reach down to the atomic level. Atoms support all of it equally. Nothing needs to be profound to be stable. Atoms don't mark transitions into sleep. They don't change behavior when consciousness fades. They continue as they always have. Sleep is a reorganization at larger scales, supported by atomic consistency. Atoms don't participate differently. If sleep arrives quietly or not at all, that variability doesn't matter to atoms. They support every state. Atoms don't require silence to function. Noise doesn't disturb them. They accommodate vibration easily. Quiet and sound are both patterns of motion. Atoms respond to both. If there are sounds around you or none at all, neither condition needs adjustment. Atoms remain steady across a wide range of environments. Atoms don't ask for completion. They don't wait for an ending. Processes remain open. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels open-ended, that openness is fine. Atoms don't conclude, they continue. Atoms don't know when they are forming the foundation of rest. They don't know they are supporting a body or a surface. They simply respond to forces. Yet that responsiveness creates reliability. Because atoms behave consistently, larger systems can relax. If you feel supported without knowing why, that support is real. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Atoms don't benefit from being noticed. They don't need recognition. They don't gain anything from attention. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady, neutral background beneath this moment. As awareness softens further or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns, unchanged and untroubled, offering gentle continuity without demand, without expectation, and without asking you to stay awake to notice at all. Atoms don't recognize gentleness as something to preserve. They don't guard it or protect it. When conditions are gentle, their responses are gentle. When conditions change, responses change too. There is no preference, only consistency. Gentle motion remains gentle because nothing adds force to it. Energy stays distributed. Vibrations remain small. Balance holds. If this moment feels light or easy, that ease doesn't require effort to maintain. Atoms are not waiting to disturb it. They will continue responding quietly as long as nothing presses. Atoms don't experience ease or strain. They respond to forces until equilibrium is reached, then remain there. Strain only appears when forces are unbalanced. In balanced systems, atoms are neither tense nor relaxed. They are simply positioned where forces cancel out. If your body feels supported without effort, that state doesn't need explanation. Atoms beneath you are holding balance without knowing they're doing so. Nothing is being held together by will. Atoms don't notice when nothing happens. They don't require events to remain active. They continue their small movements whether or not change occurs. A quiet hour and a busy one feel the same at the atomic level. Motion continues within stable limits. If nothing feels like it's happening right now, that stillness doesn't signal absence. Atoms are still exchanging energy, still vibrating, still responding. Nothing has paused. Atoms don't register waiting. They don't anticipate outcomes. They don't become impatient when conditions remain the same. A reaction that hasn't started is simply one without a path. Atoms do not experience this as delay. If you are waiting without noticing that you are waiting, that state doesn't need resolution. Atoms wait without waiting. They remain available without expectation. Atoms don't experience completion. When equilibrium is reached, They don't mark it as finished, they remain responsive. If forces shift again, they adjust. Nothing settles permanently. If you feel no need for a conclusion tonight, that openness is not unfinished. Atoms don't conclude. They continue responding as conditions change. Atoms don't recognize subtlety as something different from anything else. Small changes are responded to just as reliably as large ones. A slight temperature shift produces a slight change in motion. A small force produces a small response. If sensations are faint or distant, that faintness doesn't make them less real. Atoms respond accurately even to very small influences. Nothing needs to be intense to matter. Atoms don't experience gentleness as fragility. Gentle systems are often the most stable ones. Low-energy configurations persist easily. Violent interactions dissipate energy quickly. Gentle ones last. If this moment feels soft and stable, that softness is not precarious. Atoms are comfortable in low-energy states. They don't seek disruption. Atoms don't notice slowness. They don't count moments. They respond when forces act. Slow processes unfold without awareness of speed. Atoms do not measure time. If time feels stretched or absent right now, that doesn't disturb anything beneath it. Atoms respond in each moment without regard to duration. Atoms don't recognize attention shifting. They don't know when focus narrows or widens. Their behavior remains unchanged. A drifting mind does not loosen atomic structure. A focused one does not tighten it. If your awareness moves in and out, that movement doesn't ripple down to the smaller scales. Atoms remain steady regardless of mental state. Atoms don't experience care or neglect. They don't need tending. They follow their properties automatically. Structures persist because atomic behavior is reliable, not because something is watching over them. If you feel safe enough to let go of vigilance, that release doesn't risk collapse. Atoms don't require supervision. They are already doing what they do. Atoms don't notice repetition as sameness. They do not register cycles. Each interaction is fresh. A bond forming today is not compared to one forming earlier. There is no accumulation of sameness. If ideas repeat softly, that repetition doesn't need resistance. Atoms rely on repetition to maintain stability. Familiar patterns are efficient. Atoms don't distinguish between being part of something large or small. They interact locally and completely. An atom in a mountain and one in a breath behave the same way. Scale does not alter response. If your experience feels small or narrow right now, that does not diminish completeness. Atoms show that local interactions are sufficient. Nothing needs to be vast to be whole. Atoms don't notice when something dissolves. They don't register loss. They simply enter new arrangements. When a structure breaks down, atoms continue responding to new forces. Nothing essential disappears. If attention dissolves or thoughts fade, that fading is not loss. Atoms do not lose when configurations change. They remain available. Atoms don't experience clarity or confusion. They don't seek understanding. They respond to what is present. Confusion at larger scales does not reach the atomic level. Atoms remain consistent beneath it. If things feel unclear or undefined right now, the ambiguity doesn't disrupt stability. Atoms operate without clarity. They respond anyway. Atoms don't require silence, but they are comfortable with it. They don't generate activity to fill quiet spaces. In silence, atoms continue their small motions. Nothing compensates for absence. If silence feels wide or deep, that quiet is not empty. Atoms are still active beneath it. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't know when they are supporting rest. They don't change behavior when sleep approaches. They maintain their usual responses. Rest emerges from coordination at larger scales, made possible by atomic consistency. If sleep arrives now, later, or not at all, that variation doesn't matter to atoms. They support all states equally. Atoms don't ask for acknowledgement. They don't need to be noticed. They don't benefit from attention. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady, neutral background of this moment. As awareness softens further or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns unchanged. They offer continuity without memory, stability without effort, and gentle company without asking you to stay awake to notice. Atoms don't recognize permission. They don't wait to be allowed to behave as they do. Their responses unfold automatically, quietly, without consulting anything else. When conditions are present, responses happen. When they're not, nothing does. This lack of hesitation removes pressure from the system. Nothing is being held back. Nothing is being forced forward. Everything proceeds at the pace set by circumstances alone. If you're not giving yourself instructions right now, if you're simply letting the moment be, nothing essential is missing. Atoms don't ask whether they should respond. They respond, and balance follows. Atoms don't experience certainty or doubt. They don't question outcomes. They don't wonder if something will work. A bond forms because energies align. If they don't, it doesn't form. There is no internal debate. If your mind feels uncertain, foggy, or unconcerned with answers, that state doesn't disturb anything underneath. Atoms don't require certainty to function. They proceed without it. Atoms don't feel tension about change. They don't brace themselves. They adjust as forces shift. When energy increases, motion increases, and when energy spreads out, motion softens. These changes are smooth and proportional. If your state is changing, gradually becoming quieter, slower, less defined, that transition doesn't need managing. Atoms don't tense during change. They respond, and stability reappears. Atoms don't distinguish between being active and being idle. They don't have a concept of inactivity. Motion always continues within limits. What appears idle at larger scales is simply motion that doesn't produce visible change. Atoms continue their subtle movements regardless. If you feel inactive right now, lying still, doing nothing, that stillness is supported by constant, gentle atomic motion. Nothing has stopped. Everything continues quietly. Atoms don't recognize gentleness as something that could break. Gentle systems are often the most stable ones. Low-energy arrangements persist with little disruption. Violent interactions burn through energy quickly. Gentle ones endure. If this moment feels soft and steady, that softness is not fragile. Atoms are comfortable in low-energy states. They don't seek intensity. Atoms don't notice when things repeat. They don't mark cycles or loops. Each interaction is complete in itself. An atom responding to a force now does not compare it to earlier responses. There is no accumulation of sameness. If ideas return in familiar shapes, that familiarity doesn't require reaction. Atoms rely on repetition to maintain structure. Repetition is part of stability. Atoms don't feel progress. They don't move toward improvement. They don't know when something is better. Systems change because conditions change, not because atoms pursue advancement. If nothing feels like it's improving or declining right now, that neutrality doesn't signal stagnation. Atoms don't improve. They respond. Atoms don't experience pause. They don't stop between moments. There is no gap in their behavior. Each response follows the previous one without marking a boundary. Continuity doesn't require awareness. If your awareness feels discontinuous, slipping in and out that doesn't fracture anything beneath it, atoms don't experience interruption. They continue seamlessly. Atoms don't recognize depth. They don't know whether something is shallow or profound. They respond to local conditions only. Depth is something that emerges at larger scales, layered over simple interactions. If your experience feels flat, thin, or undefined, that quality doesn't reach down to the atomic level. Atoms support all states equally. Nothing needs to feel meaningful to be stable. Atoms don't notice when nothing demands attention. They don't become restless in quiet conditions. They remain steady. A calm environment doesn't cause atoms to seek stimulation. They remain active within narrow, predictable ranges. If nothing is pulling at your attention right now, that ease doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't require engagement. They exist comfortably without it. Atoms don't experience responsibility. They don't carry the weight of what they support. They don't know they're part of anything larger. An atom in a structure doesn't know it is holding weight. It responds to forces, and that's all. If you feel supported without effort, that support doesn't require you to hold yourself together. Atoms are handling the structure quietly. Nothing depends on vigilance. Atoms don't recognize the difference between foreground and background. They don't know which processes are noticed and which are ignored. A subtle vibration and a strong one are both simply forces of different magnitude. Atoms respond proportionally. If this fades into the background of your awareness, that fading doesn't diminish anything. Atoms don't care where attention goes. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience slowness as delay. They don't know they're taking time. They respond when forces act. Slow processes are not experienced as slow at the atomic level. They are simply sequences of responses. If time feels stretched or absent right now, that timelessness doesn't interfere with anything fundamental. Atoms don't track duration. They respond in each moment independently. Atoms don't distinguish between inner and outer space. Fields pass through boundaries smoothly. Influences overlap without needing permission. The boundary between body and air is active and porous. Atoms cross constantly. Exchange happens without awareness. If you feel less defined tonight, less separate from surroundings, that blending doesn't erase anything essential. Atoms move across boundaries continuously. Continuity persists through exchange. Atoms don't notice when systems become quiet. They don't slow down because rest is happening. They maintain their usual behavior. Rest at larger scales is supported by atomic consistency, not by atomic stillness. If rest deepens or remains light, that variation doesn't matter to atoms. They support all states equally. Atoms don't experience clarity or confusion. They don't need understanding to function. They respond to what is present. If thoughts blur or lose structure, that doesn't disrupt stability at the smallest scales. Atoms operate without clarity. They respond anyway. Atoms don't register silence as emptiness. Quiet spaces are still full of fields, motion, and interaction. Silence is simply the absence of certain vibrations. If the world feels very quiet now, that quiet is not empty. Atoms are still active beneath it. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't recognize when they are being described. They don't adjust their behavior in response to words. Explanation does not alter response. If parts of this drift past unheard, nothing is lost. Atoms aren't waiting to be understood. They continue regardless. Atoms don't ask for completion. They don't wait for things to resolve. Processes remain open-ended. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't finish. They continue. Atoms don't know when they are supporting sleep. They don't change behavior when consciousness fades. They maintain their usual responses. Sleep emerges from coordination at larger scales, made possible by atomic reliability. If sleep arrives now, later, or not at all, that variability doesn't matter to atoms. They support every state equally. Atoms don't benefit from being noticed. They don't require appreciation. They don't gain anything from attention. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady background beneath this moment, holding surfaces, air, and body together without effort. As awareness softens further, or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns unchanged, offering continuity without memory, stability without effort, and gentle company without asking you to stay awake to notice at all. Atoms don't notice when things feel complete. They don't sense arrival or resolution. They respond to what is present, and when nothing presses for change, they remain as they are. Completion is something that appears only at larger scales, layered over steady interaction. A structure feels complete because forces balance. Nothing pulls strongly enough to cause rearrangement. Atoms don't recognize this as an ending. They simply remain responsive. If this moment feels complete enough without needing anything added, that sufficiency doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't ask whether something is finished. They continue quietly. Atoms don't experience softness as weakness. Soft arrangements often last longer than rigid ones. Flexibility allows systems to absorb small changes without breaking. When forces shift slightly, atoms adjust positions and return to balance. This small yielding preserves structure. If your state feels soft tonight, less fixed, less defended, that softness is not fragile. Atoms show that resilience often comes from flexibility. Nothing needs to be rigid to endure. Atoms don't register comfort or discomfort. They don't know when something feels pleasant or unpleasant. They participate in processes that produce sensation, but they remain neutral. Because atoms don't cling to sensation, experiences can pass through systems without lingering at the deepest level. Nothing accumulates beyond its conditions. If sensations are fading or flattening right now, that easing doesn't require effort. Atoms don't hold on, they respond and move on. Atoms don't recognize quiet as something to deepen or protect. They don't amplify silence. They simply continue their usual motion. Quiet persists when nothing adds disturbance. Atoms don't introduce noise on their own. If the space around you feels very still, that stillness doesn't require maintenance. Atoms aren't waiting to disrupt it. They remain steady as long as conditions remain calm. Atoms don't anticipate awakening or sleep. They don't prepare for either state. They respond only to present conditions. Sleep does not arrive because atoms change their behavior. It arrives because larger systems coordinate differently, supported by atomic reliability. If sleep comes gently or not at all, that variability doesn't concern atoms. They support all states equally, without preference. Atoms don't recognize attention fading as loss. They don't notice when awareness narrows or disappears. Their responses remain unchanged. A sleeping system and a waking one are equally supported. Atoms continue their quiet motion either way. If awareness slips away now or later, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't wait for awareness. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience silence as empty. A quiet space is full of subtle motion, fields, and exchange. Silence is simply the absence of certain vibrations at larger scales. Even in near-perfect vacuums, fluctuations persist. Particles appear briefly and vanish. Energy shifts quietly. If quiet feels wide or deep right now, that quiet is not emptiness. Atoms are still active beneath it. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't distinguish between being part of something alive or something inert. They respond to forces the same way in both contexts. Life emerges from arrangement, not from atomic awareness. A calcium atom in bone and one in rock behave according to the same rules. Significance appears later, from perspective. If your body feels ordinary or unremarkable tonight, that ordinariness doesn't diminish what's happening within it. Atoms support life quietly, without ceremony. Atoms don't register identity. They don't know when they are part of a body, a thought, or a structure. They carry no label from one configuration to the next. When atoms move on, nothing of the previous form remains with them. Each interaction is fresh. If thoughts or images dissolve without leaving a trace, that fading mirrors how matter behaves. Atoms don't carry residue. They respond to what is present now. Atoms don't experience waiting. They don't know when nothing is happening. They remain responsive even in still conditions. A reaction that has not begun is not delayed. It simply does not have a pathway. If you're waiting without noticing that you are waiting, that state doesn't need resolution. Atoms remain available without expectation. Nothing is pending. Atoms don't notice when nothing is required of them. They don't become restless. They don't seek tasks. In calm conditions, they remain quietly active within narrow bounds. Nothing builds toward release. If nothing feels required of you right now, that ease doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms don't require demands to function. They continue comfortably. Atoms don't experience alignment as achievement. They don't know when forces cancel out. They simply respond until balance appears. What feels aligned at larger scales is just a stable arrangement at smaller ones. Nothing is trying to line up. If something feels settled without explanation, that settling doesn't need interpretation. Atoms don't know they are settled. They respond, and balance holds. Atoms don't register slowness as delay. They don't count time. They respond when forces act. Slow processes are not experienced as slow at the atomic level. They are simply sequences of responses. If time feels stretched or absent now, that timelessness doesn't interfere with anything beneath it. Atoms don't track duration. They respond in each moment independently. Atoms don't recognize boundaries as fixed. They experience gradients of influence rather than edges. Forces taper gradually. The boundary between body and surface, air and skin, is active and permeable. Atoms cross constantly. Exchange happens quietly. If you feel less defined tonight, more blended with surroundings, that blending doesn't erase anything essential. Atoms move across boundaries continuously. Continuity persists through exchange. Atoms don't experience reassurance, but they provide it. Their predictable behavior allows larger systems to relax without supervision. Because atoms behave consistently, you don't need to hold yourself together consciously. The structure beneath you remains steady. If you feel supported without knowing why, that support is real. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Atoms don't ask for attention. They don't gain anything from being noticed. They don't lose anything when ignored. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady, neutral background of this moment. As awareness softens further or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns unchanged, offering continuity without memory, stability without effort, and gentle company without asking you to stay awake to notice at all. Atoms don't recognize relief. They don't know when pressure is lifted or when effort is eased. They respond to forces, and when those forces soften, their responses soften too. Relief appears at larger scales as a consequence of balance, not as an experience. When tension disperses, atoms settle into positions where nothing pulls strongly anymore. Vibrations narrow, energy spreads evenly, stability remains without needing to be noticed. If you feel a quiet easing now, something releasing without needing to be named, that easing is being supported beneath awareness. Atoms don't celebrate relief. They simply continue responding gently. Atoms don't notice when systems stop demanding change. They don't become inactive. They remain quietly responsive. In calm conditions, nothing accumulates, nothing presses forward. Motion continues in small, contained ways. If nothing feels urgent right now, that absence of urgency doesn't signal stagnation. Atoms don't require momentum. They remain steady without direction. Atoms don't experience trust or mistrust. They don't need reassurance to function. Their behavior is reliable regardless of expectation. A bond forms when conditions allow. It remains until conditions change. Nothing watches over it. If you find yourself trusting the moment without effort, allowing things to be as they are, that trust doesn't need justification. Atoms don't require belief. They operate consistently either way. Atoms don't recognize subtlety as fragile. Small, gentle interactions often persist longer than dramatic ones. Low-energy arrangements are stable by nature. A quiet pattern can last indefinitely if nothing disrupts it. Gentleness does not invite collapse. If this moment feels subtle or barely noticeable, that softness is not at risk. Atoms are comfortable in quiet states. They don't seek intensity. Atoms don't experience openness as lack. An open configuration is simply one with many available pathways. Nothing is missing. When systems are open, atoms remain ready to respond if something changes. When nothing changes, they remain where they are. If your awareness feels open without focus, without direction, that openness doesn't need filling. Atoms remain complete without closure. Availability is enough. Atoms don't know when they are forming background. They don't distinguish foreground activity from ambient presence. Everything they interact with is immediate. A faint vibration and a strong one are both simply forces. Atoms respond proportionally, without emphasis. If this fades into the background of your awareness, that fading doesn't diminish anything. Atoms don't track prominence. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience readiness. They don't prepare for change. They respond when something occurs. A shift in temperature, a change in pressure, an interaction arrives, and atoms adjust. If you feel ready for nothing in particular, just present that state doesn't require action. Atoms don't wait in anticipation. They respond only when needed. Atoms don't register when nothing is expected of them. They don't seek tasks. They remain quietly active within stable limits. In calm systems, nothing builds toward release. Energy remains distributed. Balance persists. If nothing feels expected of you right now, that ease doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms don't need demands to function. They continue comfortably. Atoms don't experience satisfaction. They don't know when things are good enough. They respond until forces cancel out, then remain there. Equilibrium doesn't feel complete to an atom. It simply persists. If this moment feels sufficient without needing improvement, that sufficiency doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't evaluate. They respond. Atoms don't recognize quiet as something that might end. They don't brace for disturbance. They remain steady. A calm environment doesn't create tension beneath it. Atoms don't anticipate disruption. If quiet feels stable now, that stability doesn't need guarding. Atoms aren't waiting to disturb it. They remain consistent. Atoms don't experience softness as vulnerability. Soft systems adjust easily to small changes. Flexibility absorbs disturbance. Rigid systems break more easily than flexible ones. Atoms do not prefer rigidity. If your state feels soft and undefended, that softness is not fragile. Atoms show that resilience often comes from yielding slightly. Nothing needs to be held tightly. Atoms don't recognize presence as something to maintain. They don't hold themselves in place consciously. Forces do that work. A surface remains supportive because forces balance, not because atoms intend to support. Support emerges naturally. If you feel supported without effort, that support doesn't depend on attention. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Nothing needs to be done. Atoms don't experience attention drifting as abandonment. They don't notice when awareness leaves. Their responses remain unchanged. A sleeping system and a waking one are equally supported. Atoms continue their steady behavior either way. If awareness fades completely for a while, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't wait for awareness. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience silence as absence. Quiet spaces are still full of motion at small scales. Fields fluctuate. Energy shifts subtly. Silence is simply the absence of large disturbances. Atoms remain active beneath it. If the world feels very quiet now, that quiet is not empty. Atoms are still moving gently beneath perception. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't recognize being alone as separation. An atom does not feel isolated when interactions are rare, it remains complete. In sparse regions of space, atoms drift alone for long periods without change. They don't degrade, they don't wait. If you feel alone in a quiet way, that state doesn't imply deficiency. Atoms show that existence doesn't require constant interaction. Presence is enough. Atoms don't know when they are supporting sleep. They don't change behavior when consciousness fades. They maintain their usual responses. Sleep arises from coordination at larger scales, supported by atomic consistency. Atoms don't participate differently. If sleep arrives gently now, or later, or not at all, that variability doesn't matter to atoms. They support all states equally. Atoms don't require memory. They don't carry past configurations forward. Each interaction stands alone. A bond forming now is not influenced by a bond that formed earlier. Atoms respond fresh. If thoughts or sensations fade without leaving a trace, that fading doesn't disrupt continuity. Atoms don't rely on memory. They operate fully in the present. Atoms don't recognize when nothing is happening. They don't become restless. They remain quietly responsive. A still hour and a busy one feel the same at the atomic level. Motion continues within stable bounds. If nothing feels like it's happening now, that stillness doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't require events. They exist comfortably without them. Atoms don't ask for closure. They don't wait for things to resolve. Processes remain open-ended. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels open or unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't finish, they continue. Atoms don't benefit from being noticed. They don't lose anything when ignored. They don't require appreciation. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady, neutral background beneath this moment, holding surfaces, air, and body together without effort. As awareness softens further, or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns unchanged, offering continuity without memory, stability without effort, and gentle company without asking you to stay awake to notice at all. Atoms don't experience letting go as an action. They don't release deliberately. When forces diminish, their responses simply become smaller. Nothing is pushed away, nothing is dropped. Balance returns because there is less pulling. When energy spreads out, atoms settle naturally into quieter motion. They don't resist this softening. They don't cling to earlier states. They adjust and remain. If you feel yourself letting go without deciding to, without effort or intention, that ease doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't decide to let go. They respond, and stillness appears on its own. Atoms don't notice when things become simpler. They don't register complexity fading. They respond to what remains. A system with fewer active forces is not empty. It is simply balanced. Atoms continue their subtle motion, unchanged in their capacity to respond. If thoughts thin out, or awareness becomes less detailed, that simplicity is not absence. Atoms remain fully present beneath it. Nothing essential has gone missing. Atoms don't experience quiet as something earned. They don't know when activity has decreased. They continue in their usual way, regardless of scale. A quiet night and a busy day are equally ordinary at the atomic level. Motion continues, fields persist, interactions remain. If the world feels quieter now than it did earlier, that shift doesn't require interpretation. Atoms don't compare states. They respond to what is present. Atoms don't recognize gentleness as something to hold on to. They don't fear its disappearance. When conditions are gentle, responses are gentle. When they change, responses change too. There is no guarding of softness. There is no anxiety about disturbance. If this moment feels soft and unguarded, that softness doesn't need protection. Atoms aren't waiting to disrupt it. They remain steady as long as conditions remain calm. Atoms don't experience slowness as delay. They don't feel time stretching. They respond when forces act and remain still when they don't. Slow processes unfold without awareness of pace. Atoms do not notice how long something takes. If time feels loose or undefined right now, that timelessness doesn't interfere with anything beneath it. Atoms don't track duration. They respond fully in each moment. Atoms don't register depth. They don't know when something feels shallow or profound. They respond locally. Depth is something that appears later, layered over simple interactions. If your experience feels flat or indistinct, that quality doesn't reach the smallest scales. Atoms support all states equally. Nothing needs to feel meaningful to be stable. Atoms don't notice when nothing is being asked of them. They don't seek tasks. They don't become idle. In calm conditions, they remain quietly responsive. Motion continues within narrow, predictable bounds. If nothing feels required of you right now, that ease doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms don't require demands to function. They continue comfortably. Atoms don't experience reassurance, but they provide it. Their predictable behavior allows larger systems to relax without supervision. Because atoms behave consistently, surfaces remain solid, air continues to support breathing, structures remain intact. If you feel supported without knowing why, that support is not imagined. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Nothing depends on vigilance. Atoms don't recognize awareness fading as loss. They don't notice when consciousness narrows or disappears. Their behavior remains unchanged. A sleeping system and a waking one are equally supported. Atoms continue their steady motion either way. If awareness slips away completely for a while, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't wait for awareness. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience silence as emptiness. Quiet spaces are still full of motion at small scales. Fields fluctuate gently. Energy shifts subtly. Silence is simply the absence of large disturbances. Atoms remain active beneath it. If the world feels very quiet now, that quiet is not empty. Atoms are still moving softly beneath perception. Everything continues. Atoms don't recognize solitude as lack. An atom on its own is complete. It does not require interaction to remain itself. In sparse regions of space, atoms drift alone for long periods without change. They don't degrade. They don't wait. If you feel alone in a quiet, neutral way, that state doesn't imply deficiency. Atoms show that existence doesn't require constant interaction. Presence is enough. Atoms don't notice when systems stop demanding change. They don't become inactive. They remain quietly responsive. Nothing builds toward release. Energy stays distributed. Balance holds. If nothing feels urgent right now, that absence of urgency doesn't signal stagnation. Atoms don't require momentum. They remain steady without direction. Atoms don't experience trust or mistrust. They don't need reassurance to function. Their behavior is reliable regardless of expectation. A bond forms when conditions allow. It remains until conditions change. Nothing watches over it. If you find yourself trusting the moment without effort, allowing things to be as they are, that trust doesn't need justification. Atoms don't require belief. They operate consistently either way. Atoms don't register subtlety as fragility. Small, gentle interactions often persist longer than dramatic ones. Low-energy arrangements are stable by nature. Quiet patterns can last indefinitely if nothing disrupts them. Gentleness does not invite collapse. If this moment feels subtle or barely noticeable, that softness is not at risk. Atoms are comfortable in quiet states. They don't seek intensity. Atoms don't experience openness as lack. An open configuration is simply one with many possible pathways. Nothing is missing. When systems are open, atoms remain available. When nothing changes, they remain where they are. If your awareness feels open without focus or direction, that openness doesn't need filling. Atoms remain complete without closure. Availability is enough. Atoms don't recognize the idea of background. They don't know when they are unnoticed. Everything they interact with is immediate. A faint vibration and a strong one are both simply forces. Atoms respond proportionally, without emphasis. If this fades into the background of your awareness, that fading doesn't diminish anything. Atoms don't track prominence. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience readiness. They don't prepare for change. They respond when something occurs. A shift in temperature, a change in pressure, an interaction arrives, and atoms adjust. If you feel ready for nothing in particular, just present that state doesn't require action. Atoms don't wait in anticipation. They respond only when needed. Atoms don't register when nothing is expected of them. They don't seek tasks. They remain quietly active within stable limits. In calm systems, nothing builds toward release. Energy remains distributed. Balance persists. If nothing feels expected of you right now, that ease doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms don't need demands to function. They continue comfortably. Atoms don't experience satisfaction. They don't know when things are good enough. They respond until forces cancel out, then remain there. Equilibrium doesn't feel complete to an atom. It simply persists. If this moment feels sufficient without needing improvement, that sufficiency doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't evaluate. They respond. Atoms don't recognize quiet as something that might end. They don't brace for disturbance. They remain steady. A calm environment doesn't create tension beneath it. Atoms don't anticipate disruption. If quiet feels stable now, that stability doesn't need guarding. Atoms aren't waiting to disturb it. They remain consistent. Atoms don't experience softness as vulnerability. Soft systems adjust easily to small changes. Flexibility absorbs disturbance. Rigid systems break more easily than flexible ones. Atoms do not prefer rigidity. If your state feels soft and undefended, that softness is not fragile. Atoms show that resilience often comes from yielding slightly. Nothing needs to be held tightly. Atoms don't recognize presence as something to maintain. They don't hold themselves in place consciously. Forces do that work. A surface remains supportive because forces balance, not because atoms intend to support. Support emerges naturally. If you feel supported without effort, that support doesn't depend on attention. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Nothing needs to be done. Atoms don't experience attention drifting as abandonment. They don't notice when awareness leaves. Their responses remain unchanged. A sleeping system and a waking one are equally supported. Atoms continue their steady behavior either way. If awareness fades completely now or later, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't wait for awareness. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience silence as absence. Quiet spaces are still full of motion at small scales. Fields fluctuate. Energy shifts subtly. Silence is simply the absence of certain vibrations. Atoms remain active beneath it. If the world feels very quiet now, that quiet is not empty. Atoms are still active beneath perception. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't ask for closure. They don't wait for things to resolve. Processes remain open-ended. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't finish. They continue. Atoms don't benefit from being noticed. They don't lose anything when ignored. They don't require appreciation. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady background beneath this moment, holding surfaces, air, and body together without effort. As awareness softens further or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns unchanged. offering continuity without memory, stability without effort, and gentle company without asking you to stay awake to notice at all. Atoms don't recognize ease as something that could slip away. They don't guard balance or worry about losing it. When forces are even, responses remain even. Stability continues without effort or awareness. Nothing at the atomic level is holding calm in place. Calm is simply what happens when nothing pushes too hard. Atoms remain where they are because that is where forces cancel out. If ease feels present right now, unremarkable, quiet, sufficient that ease doesn't need protecting, atoms are not waiting to disturb it. They will continue responding gently as long as conditions stay gentle. Atoms don't experience drifting as movement away from something. They don't know when they are transitioning. They respond to changes as they occur, without marking direction. A gradual shift from one state to another does not register as motion for atoms. It's simply a change in balance. If you feel yourself drifting, attention softening, awareness loosening that movement doesn't imply leaving anything behind, atoms don't experience loss during transition. They adjust and remain. Atoms don't recognize quiet as fragile. They don't brace against interruption. They don't prepare for noise. In quiet conditions, atoms remain active within narrow ranges. Nothing accumulates, nothing destabilizes. If the quiet around you feels steady, that steadiness doesn't require vigilance. Atoms are comfortable in calm environments. They don't generate disturbance on their own. Atoms don't experience simplicity as emptiness. Fewer active forces simply means fewer adjustments. Nothing essential is missing. A simple configuration is often the most stable one. Atoms remain fully responsive even when little is happening. If your experience feels simple right now, just presence, or just rest, that simplicity doesn't need to be filled. Atoms are fully present in simple states. Nothing is lacking. Atoms don't experience gentleness as something to hold on to. They don't cling to soft conditions. When gentleness is present, responses are gentle. When it changes, responses change too. There is no preference, only proportional response. If this moment feels gentle without effort, that gentleness doesn't need reinforcement. Atoms aren't attached to it. They respond to what is. Atoms don't recognize stillness as stopping. They don't know when movement has become subtle. They continue vibrating, exchanging energy quietly. Stillness at larger scales is supported by this subtle motion underneath. Nothing freezes. If your body feels still, that stillness is active at smaller scales. Atoms are maintaining it for you. You don't need to participate. Atoms don't experience trust. They don't rely on expectation. Their behavior does not change based on belief. Whether something is trusted or doubted does not alter atomic response. Conditions determine outcomes, not attitudes. If you find yourself trusting the moment without thinking about it or not thinking about trust at all, that neutrality doesn't matter to atoms. They behave the same way either way. Reliability is built in. Atoms don't notice when attention fades completely. They don't register sleep arriving. They don't slow down or shift in response to unconsciousness. Sleep does not happen because atoms rest. It happens because larger systems reorganize, supported by atomic steadiness. If sleep comes now, later, or in pieces, that variation doesn't concern atoms. They support all states equally, without distinction. Atoms don't experience silence as absence. A silent space is still full of fields, motion, and interaction. Nothing is empty. Even when nothing is audible, atoms continue exchanging energy quietly. The background activity never stops. If silence feels deep or wide right now, that depth is not emptiness. Atoms are still present beneath it. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't recognize being alone as separation. An atom drifting without interaction is still complete. It does not feel unfinished. In vast stretches of space, atoms exist alone for long periods without change. They don't weaken, they don't wait. If you feel alone in a calm, neutral way, that state doesn't imply lack. Atoms show that existence does not require constant interaction. Presence alone is enough. Atoms don't notice when nothing is required of them. They don't seek tasks. They don't become idle. In calm systems, they remain quietly responsive. Motion continues within stable limits. If nothing feels required of you right now, that ease doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms don't require purpose to function. They continue comfortably. Atoms don't experience reassurance, but they provide it. Their predictable behavior allows larger systems to relax. Because atoms behave consistently, surfaces hold, air supports breath, and structures remain stable, nothing needs to be checked. If you feel supported without knowing why, that support is real. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Nothing depends on effort. Atoms don't recognize when awareness slips away. They don't register gaps in attention. Their responses remain unchanged. A sleeping system and a waking one are equally supported. Atoms continue their steady behavior either way. If awareness fades entirely for a while, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't wait for awareness. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience time as passing. They participate in processes that unfold over time, but they do not measure duration. Each interaction is complete. Seconds and hours do not feel different at the atomic level. Response is always immediate. If time feels unclear or absent right now, that timelessness doesn't disrupt anything beneath it. Atoms don't track time. They respond moment by moment. Atoms don't recognize depth or meaning. They don't know when something is profound or ordinary. They respond locally. Meaning appears later, layered over simple interaction. If nothing feels meaningful right now, that absence doesn't create emptiness. Atoms don't operate on meaning. They operate on balance. Atoms don't register fading as loss. When configurations dissolve, atoms rearrange. Nothing essential disappears. A thought fading is not different from a molecule breaking apart. Components remain available. If thoughts thin out or disappear, that fading doesn't disrupt continuity. Atoms don't carry residue. They respond to what is present now. Atoms don't experience readiness. They don't prepare for change. They respond when change occurs. A shift in temperature, a change in pressure. Atoms adjust without anticipation. If you feel ready for nothing at all, simply present that state doesn't require action. Atoms don't wait. They respond only when needed. Atoms don't experience satisfaction or dissatisfaction. They don't know when something is enough. They respond until balance appears, then remain. Equilibrium doesn't feel complete to an atom. It simply persists. If this moment feels sufficient without needing improvement, that sufficiency doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't evaluate. They respond. Atoms don't ask for closure. They don't wait for things to resolve. Processes remain open. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't finish. They continue. Atoms don't benefit from being noticed. They don't lose anything when ignored. They don't require attention. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady background beneath this moment, holding surfaces, air, and body together without effort. As awareness softens further or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns unchanged, offering continuity without memory, stability without effort, and gentle company without asking you to stay awake to notice at all. Atoms don't recognize rest as something that begins. They don't mark the moment when activity slows. They simply continue responding as forces lessen and balance returns. Rest appears at larger scales as motion becomes smaller and more contained. In a resting system, atoms still vibrate, still exchange energy, still adjust to their surroundings. Nothing switches off, nothing goes dormant. The changes are simply quiet enough to fade from notice. If rest feels gradual, arriving without a clear edge that softness is natural, atoms don't enter rest. They support it by remaining steady. Atoms don't experience stillness as fragile. They don't worry that motion might suddenly surge. In balanced conditions, nothing builds toward disruption. Energy remains spread out. Forces cancel gently. Patterns persist without effort. If stillness feels stable right now, that stability doesn't need guarding. Atoms are not waiting to disturb it. They remain where balance places them. Atoms don't recognize awareness as something separate from the world. They don't notice when attention turns inward or outward. Their responses remain the same. A thought, a sensation, a silence, each is simply a pattern of interaction at larger scales. Atoms respond locally, without reference to awareness. If your awareness drifts inward, outward, or nowhere in particular, that movement doesn't ripple down to the smallest scales. Atoms remain steady regardless of where attention goes. Atoms don't experience gentleness as vulnerability. Soft conditions are often the most stable ones. Low-energy arrangements persist easily. Gentle systems absorb small disturbances without change. Nothing snaps, nothing accumulates strain. If this moment feels soft and undefended, that softness is not at risk. Atoms are comfortable in gentle states. They don't seek intensity. Atoms don't notice when nothing is happening. They don't become restless in quiet conditions. They remain quietly active within narrow limits. A quiet hour and a busy one are equally ordinary at the atomic level. Motion continues. Fields persist. Interactions remain. If nothing feels like it's happening right now, that stillness doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms are still present, still active, still responsive. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't recognize openness as something unfinished. An open system is simply one with available pathways. Nothing is missing. When no changes occur, atoms remain where they are. When conditions shift, they adjust. Availability does not require motion. If your awareness feels open without focus, without direction, that openness doesn't need filling. Atoms remain complete without closure. Being available is enough. Atoms don't experience reassurance, but they provide it. Their predictable behavior allows larger systems to relax without supervision. Because atoms behave consistently, surfaces support weight, air supports breath, and structures remain intact. Nothing needs to be monitored. If you feel supported without effort, that support is real. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Nothing depends on vigilance. Atoms don't register attention fading as loss. They don't notice when consciousness narrows or disappears. Their behavior remains unchanged. A sleeping system and a waking one are equally supported. Atoms continue their steady behavior either way. If awareness slips away completely for a while, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't wait for awareness. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience silence as emptiness. Quiet spaces are still full of motion at small scales. Fields fluctuate. Energy shifts subtly. Silence is simply the absence of large disturbances. Atoms remain active beneath it. If the world feels very quiet now, that quiet is not empty. Atoms are still moving gently beneath perception. Everything continues softly. Atoms don't recognize solitude as lack. An atom on its own is complete. It does not require interaction to remain itself. In sparse regions of space, atoms drift alone for long periods without change. They don't weaken. They don't wait. If you feel alone in a calm, neutral way, that state doesn't imply deficiency. Atoms show that existence does not require constant interaction. Presence alone is enough. Atoms don't notice when systems stop demanding change. They don't become inactive. They remain quietly responsive. Nothing builds toward release. Energy stays distributed, balance holds. If nothing feels urgent right now, that absence of urgency doesn't signal stagnation. Atoms don't require momentum. They remain steady without direction. Atoms don't experience trust or mistrust. They don't need reassurance to function. Their behavior is reliable regardless of expectation. A bond forms when conditions allow. It remains until conditions change. Nothing watches over it. If you find yourself trusting the moment without effort or not thinking about trust at all, that neutrality doesn't matter to atoms. They behave the same way either way. Reliability is built in. Atoms don't register subtlety as fragility. Small, gentle interactions often persist longer than dramatic ones. Low-energy arrangements are stable by nature. Quiet patterns can last indefinitely if nothing disrupts them. Gentleness does not invite collapse. If this moment feels subtle or barely noticeable, that softness is not at risk. Atoms are comfortable in quiet states. They don't seek intensity. Atoms don't experience openness as lack. An open configuration is simply one with many possible pathways. Nothing is missing. When systems are open, atoms remain available. When nothing changes, they remain where they are. If your awareness feels open without focus or direction, that openness doesn't need filling. Atoms remain complete without closure. Availability is enough. Atoms don't recognize background as something separate. They don't know when they are unnoticed. Everything they interact with is immediate. A faint vibration and a strong one are both simply forces. Atoms respond proportionally, without emphasis. If this fades into the background of your awareness, that fading doesn't diminish anything. Atoms don't track prominence. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience readiness. They don't prepare for change. They respond when something occurs. A shift in temperature, a change in pressure, an interaction arrives and atoms adjust. If you feel ready for nothing in particular, simply present that state doesn't require action. Atoms don't wait in anticipation. They respond only when needed. Atoms don't register when nothing is expected of them. They don't seek tasks. They remain quietly active within stable limits. In calm systems, nothing builds toward release. Energy remains distributed. Balance persists. If nothing feels expected of you right now, that ease doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms don't need demands to function. They continue comfortably. Atoms don't experience satisfaction or dissatisfaction. They don't know when something is enough. They respond until forces cancel out, then remain. Equilibrium doesn't feel complete to an atom. It simply persists. If this moment feels sufficient without needing improvement, that sufficiency doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't evaluate. They respond. Atoms don't ask for closure. They don't wait for things to resolve. Processes remain open-ended. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't finish. They continue. Atoms don't benefit from being noticed. They don't lose anything when ignored. They don't require attention. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly, or not at all, atoms continue their calm participation. They remain the steady background beneath this moment, holding surfaces, air, and body together without effort. As awareness softens further or drifts away entirely, atoms keep their quiet patterns unchanged, offering continuity without memory, stability without effort, and gentle company without asking you to stay awake to notice at all. Atoms don't experience slowing down as something that needs to be managed. They don't notice when motion becomes smaller or quieter. They respond to forces, and when those forces are gentle, their responses are gentle too. There is no threshold to cross. Nothing announces a change. As energy disperses, atoms settle into narrower ranges of motion. Vibrations soften. Interactions become quieter. This is not an achievement. It is simply what happens when nothing presses. If your own state feels like it's easing without direction, no clear shift. Just less effort that easing doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't need to be told to slow. They respond, and calm appears naturally. Atoms don't recognize the idea of enough. They don't know when a state has reached sufficiency. They remain responsive as long as forces act, and still when they don't. Equilibrium is not marked or celebrated. It simply persists until conditions change. If this moment feels sufficient complete without being full, that sufficiency doesn't require affirmation. Atoms don't evaluate states. They respond and remain. Atoms don't experience awareness drifting as separation. They don't know when attention wanders or fades. Their behavior does not depend on being noticed. A system can function smoothly while awareness comes and goes. Atoms continue their steady interactions without interruption. If awareness slips away for a while, nothing underneath needs to pause. Atoms don't wait for attention to return. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience quiet as fragile. They don't brace against noise or disturbance. They don't prepare for interruption. In quiet conditions, atoms remain active within narrow, predictable bounds. Nothing accumulates, nothing destabilizes. If the quiet around you feels steady, that steadiness doesn't require guarding. Atoms are comfortable in calm environments. They do not introduce disturbance on their own. Atoms don't notice when experience becomes simple. They don't register complexity fading. They respond to what remains. A system with fewer active forces is not empty. It is balanced. Atoms continue their subtle motion unchanged. If thoughts thin out or sensations become less defined, that simplicity is not loss. Atoms remain fully present beneath it. Nothing essential has disappeared. Atoms don't recognize gentleness as something to hold on to. They don't cling to soft conditions. When gentleness is present, responses are gentle. When it shifts, responses shift too. There is no attachment, only proportional response. If this moment feels gentle without effort, that gentleness doesn't need reinforcement. Atoms aren't attached to it. They respond to what is. Atoms don't experience stillness as stopping. They don't know when movement has become subtle. They continue vibrating, exchanging energy quietly. Stillness at larger scales is supported by this subtle motion underneath. Nothing freezes, nothing locks in place. If your body feels still, that stillness is active at smaller scales. Atoms are maintaining it for you. You don't need to participate. Atoms don't experience trust or mistrust. They don't rely on expectation. Their behavior does not change based on belief. Whether something is trusted, doubted, or ignored entirely does not alter atomic response. Conditions determine outcomes, not attitudes. If you find yourself trusting the moment without thinking about it or not thinking about trust at all, that neutrality doesn't matter to atoms. Reliability is already built in. Atoms don't notice when sleep approaches. They don't register consciousness fading. They don't change behavior when awareness disappears. Sleep does not happen because atoms rest. It happens because larger systems reorganize, supported by atomic steadiness. If sleep comes now, later, in fragments, or not at all, that variation doesn't concern atoms. They support all states equally. Atoms don't experience silence as emptiness. A silent space is still full of motion at small scales. Fields fluctuate. Energy shifts gently. Silence is simply the absence of large disturbances. Atoms remain active beneath it. If the world feels very quiet now, that quiet is not empty. Atoms are still moving softly beneath perception. Everything continues. Atoms don't recognize solitude as lack. An atom on its own is complete. It does not require interaction to remain itself. In sparse regions of space, atoms drift alone for long periods without change. They don't weaken. They don't wait. If you feel alone in a calm, neutral way, that state doesn't imply deficiency. Atoms show that existence does not require constant interaction. Presence alone is enough. Atoms don't notice when nothing is required of them. They don't seek tasks. They don't become idle. In calm systems, they remain quietly responsive. Motion continues within stable limits. If nothing feels required of you right now, that ease doesn't signal emptiness. Atoms don't need purpose to function. They continue comfortably. Atoms don't experience reassurance, but they provide it. Their predictable behavior allows larger systems to relax without supervision. Because atoms behave consistently, surfaces hold, air supports breath, and structures remain stable. Nothing needs to be checked. If you feel supported without knowing why, that support is real. Atoms are maintaining it quietly. Nothing depends on effort. Atoms don't recognize when awareness slips away. They don't register gaps in attention. Their responses remain unchanged. A sleeping system and a waking one are equally supported. Atoms continue their steady behavior either way. If awareness fades entirely for a while, nothing essential is interrupted. Atoms don't wait for awareness. They continue regardless. Atoms don't experience time as passing. They participate in processes that unfold over time, but they do not measure duration. Each interaction is complete. Seconds and hours do not feel different at the atomic level. Response is always immediate. If time feels unclear or absent right now, that timelessness doesn't disrupt anything beneath it. Atoms don't track time. They respond moment by moment. Atoms don't recognize depth or meaning. They don't know when something is profound or ordinary. They respond locally. Meaning appears later, layered over simple interaction. If nothing feels meaningful right now, that absence doesn't create emptiness. Atoms don't operate on meaning. They operate on balance. Atoms don't register fading as loss. When configurations dissolve, atoms rearrange. Nothing essential disappears. A thought fading is not different from a molecule breaking apart. Components remain available. If thoughts thin out or disappear, that fading doesn't disrupt continuity. Atoms don't carry residue. They respond to what is present now. Atoms don't experience readiness. They don't prepare for change. They respond when change occurs. A shift in temperature, a change in pressure, atoms adjust without anticipation. If you feel ready for nothing at all, simply present, that state doesn't require action. Atoms don't wait. They respond only when needed. Atoms don't experience satisfaction or dissatisfaction. They don't know when something is enough. They respond until forces cancel out, then remain. Equilibrium doesn't feel complete to an atom. It simply persists. If this moment feels sufficient without needing improvement, that sufficiency doesn't need explanation. Atoms don't evaluate. They respond. Atoms don't ask for closure. They don't wait for things to resolve. Processes remain open-ended. Equilibrium is approached, drifted from, and approached again. Nothing settles permanently. If this feels unfinished, that openness is acceptable. Atoms don't finish, they continue. Atoms don't benefit from being noticed. They don't lose anything when ignored. They don't require attention. Whether this is heard clearly, faintly,